friends and enemies. Glad you're here. This is going to be a fun one, I think, just from reactions and such. But I'm echoing on somebody. Who am I echoing on?
Maybe yourself, because you're also a lot softer.
I'm a lot softer. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, quieter is the word he's looking for.
Quieter, yes. That.
I don't know what you're talking about. This is a professional stream. We don't do anything wrong in this. Everything is supposedly working as it's supposed to be.
As someone who speaks Dutch, though, I can fully understand why he said softer.
That makes one of us, or two of us, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that any better? Any better? Maybe?
Yeah,
No? Okay. As long as somebody can understand me, I guess that's all that matters. Freaking gnats. All right. So, professionalism. We have a interesting video topic about fans, fandom, all that fun jazz. I think I'm the only person here who's watched it, but somebody might surprise me. And Gadfly showing off with his cool sword collection. Making me jealous.
He's ready for war. That's what it is.
He's going to need to be for this one, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is... let me pull her up. This is a... I don't know if you know who these guys are, but they are... I'd say the opposite to us in probably every way. So I guess we'll just jump into it, and then if you want me to pause or something, just let me know, just so we can get done sometimes before midnight tonight. So here we go. Oh, that's the wrong one.
Going off the rails on the queen.
Damn, that's loud.
Sorry.
Wanted to see if you guys would
Is that still loud?
mind,
Or,
each of us kind of just
is that still loud for you guys? Or good?
I mean, it's paused, so...
Oh, I know. I'm talking about like the boom and everything. Was it too loud?
giving our thoughts on what a fan versus an anti-fan is, because it's one of something I really want to try to do regularly, where like we kind of break down the terms that we use, because it's kind of the opposite of what the right does, right? Like they just throw words around, and they're hiding all these intentions and other dog whistles and stuff like that. And so I think it's important to kind of do the opposite, right? To like put it all out there. This is what we're talking about whenever we say these things. There's definitions for fan, right, and fandom, right?
Not to get too political, okay? But that is a classic leftism trope where he's attempting to say that those of us who say something don't mean what we're really saying, but what they think we mean. Okay. That is explain that for the audience,
Yeah. And while they get a little bit political in this,
They also mentioned the rights just there.
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
Well, it's called straw man. So
They give away their political leanings, and I don't intend this to become a political fallout in terms of like everyone talking about politics all of a sudden. But they give themselves away, and I mean, among us, we might even have a variety of political leanings. That's fine. It's not a big deal. That's not the point of this. The point is mostly how they talk about or treat things. I would like to point out that actual Fandom's logo is AF. So is anti-fan. Just throwing that out there as a coincidence while you're watching. So,
does he have a 7-Up logo back there?
does he have a what?
Look right behind the dude with the beard's head. Is that a 7-Up logo? Like,
Could be.
Say, which beard with the dude? There's two of them.
oh,
The
the
left
left
one.
glasses.
The left
Just
one.
right of his head.
Jarek.
No, that's 1-Up. It's
Oh,
the
okay.
Mario 1-Up for the mushroom.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah.
I mean, it could be a 7-Up reference, probably. I don't know. There's like a halo around the one, so I'm assuming it's the guardian angel kind of thing. That's what a extra life is. Anyway,
and probably how I think of it overlaps with that somewhat, but generally I just consider my fandom, my personal fandom, to be my personal connection to a thing, and like how it's influenced me, how I've related to it, how it's inspired me or comforted me or give me escape or whatever. And then like fandom, the proper term fandom, which is about a community, and I take that pretty literally, especially now that we have like the Discord that we're trying to build a community there. I think about what would a community be like if I was literally building a community like of homes in IRL, so to speak, and how do we make sure that we protected each other and looked out for each other and stuff like that. So that's how I see a fandom, is and what I hope it could be. Like, people have said to me before, "Oh, actual fandom, you think you're the only way to do fandom?" It's like, it's not about me. I'm not describing myself with my channel. I'm describing like a kind of aspiration, an ideal that I'd like to aspire.
I would like to point out that he's like, it's not about me. I'm like, that's the most honest thing you've ever said that I know of. So a lot of times when people, like, if we were to talk about fandoms like the Tolkien fandom, Wheel of Time fandom, or Star Wars, or whatever, Pirates of the Caribbean or something, most of the time we're talking about how we view the fandom. We're viewing it from the fandom perspective of the IP. So like the IP has the fandom and we're a part of it, but we're not the creators of it. Like, we came together, like, if Gadfly and I met at a party and all of a sudden we just started randomly talking about fantasy stuff, we've all of a sudden joined in like a fantasy collective of people, and I hate the word collective, but I'll use it. A fantasy collective of people who enjoy similar.
Maybe call it a collection then.
Who's collecting us then? What? Come on.
Well, good point.
So essentially, we would not be creating the fandom. We would be adding to the fandom because the IPs already exist. So they are the foundation of a fandom, and we're just kind of helping build kind of the experience people have with the IP. That's what the fandom would technically be.
Yeah. So he talks about this idea of building this community, right? But it's you have to build the community around something. You can't just throw a bunch of people together and that's your community, right? Like there has to be
it wouldn't be something focused on anything particular.
Yeah.
You have to have that one particular thing to be focused.
There's the commonality of it, right? And yes, there will always be like sort of differences and so on and so forth, but when you bring somebody into that community who is not focused on that topic, that idea, that goal, that whatever, then it becomes disruptive to that community. So that's how I view a lot of the issues with fandom right now. Is you have a whole bunch of people who are coming into the collective community of people who enjoy a particular work. Star Trek, Star Wars, Tolkien, Wheel of Time, whatever. But their focus is not on that topic. They're only conditionally interested in that topic, and they're bringing all their other interest into that topic and focusing. So changing the focus of Star Wars, for example, from Star Wars to whatever else they're trying to bring, right? So it's if the focus of the community is not what the community is centered around, then it's entirely disruptive and fragmentary. And
Well,
in a way, I suppose you could here wonder about the distinction between groups of fans and fandom, right? At what point does it shift into the other? Yeah, and in this case, I think if you have people who are not actually interested in it joining, then they're not fans, but they do become part of the fandom, sort of. And then maybe, I don't know.
But
we've only seen.
I don't know where I'm going with this.
Female Space Marines.
So we've
Are
seen
they fans if they ask for female Space Marines?
Right, that's an excellent question.
It depends on how much they know about Space Marines in general.
So
well, I mean, they're completely ignoring the Adepta Sororitas, right?
Exactly.
So they've forgotten one complete chunk of the setting of the universe in favor of
Modern.
Well, no. See, here's the thing. like, so we've seen like 1 minute and 49 seconds of what. So I don't know for sure what they're gonna say, but I have my predictions in place. And
They're
when
probably
you're
right.
a Marxist, right, you are told to subvert and deconstruct things, not to make them better or to highlight stuff that's in there. That because those are valid techniques, like to to make something better. Like, but
Mhm.
when you Marxists do it, they're doing it to replace what's originally in the subject with their own, like, own version of their own
It's
morality, their own whatever.
it's less a deconstruction and more a demolition.
Well,
Yeah.
in effect, that's what happens. But the point I'm getting at is, I'm trying to use like the word.
But they don't have anything to replace it.
Well, they do. It's called
Usually,
Marxism,
well, okay.
and it's
Yeah,
failed.
Yeah, but
It's pure
usually
fail, you know.
they don't specifically have an intent to replace it with something. It should just magically appear.
Well, no. They want it to. Let's see. The thing is, they don't want to replace it. They want to replace it, and they want it to collapse, and then Marxism takes over. But anyway, the point I'm getting at is when they ignore, like you were saying, the Adeptus. I'm not a big Warhammer guy, like the Adeptus, whatever. That's part of their concept of it doesn't fit what we're trying to do. Let's de-exist it. You know what I mean? Just like when they do, when they like in Rings of Prime, what they did to Galadriel's backstory, they just erased it, basically.
Yeah.
You know, because
To be
that's
fair,
what they're
they
trying
weren't
to do.
allowed to tell the proper story because they didn't have the rights, but they at least could have given us something.
No, they
better
have enough stories mentioned in like the timelines that they could have included the real. And we know this because remember the. I don't want to sidetrack the video. But this is a headbang. Like, I wanted to punch my screen even more than usual. Like, Galadriel has that 17-minute spiel with the origin for the show, which has nothing to do with the reality of Tolkien, right? The whole right. Then they get to Fëanor's tools and mention the actual backstory. That should have been, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Is that part in the appendices though?
well, it's in the timelines. Like, if you go through the timelines, you'll see the events
I don't
mentioned.
know if it's in the appendices.
Yeah,
They
okay.
mentioned Theodore's tools and the backstory in the show. Means they could have done it at the beginning. They could have mentioned they could have mentioned all the stuff that was related to that from the appendices, because once they add it in the show, it's already there.
Yeah.
So
The other thing about that, right, is
To be honest,
There's
I
a
don't
difference-
actually remember anything beyond episode 6 because that's where the show ended officially. I'd say
there's the difference between telling the story.
everyone dies in the volcano. Yeah.
So they didn't have the rights to tell the story of the stuff, right?
the second
Of the Silmarillion. They only had the rights to tell the stories of the things in the appendices.
Yeah.
But the stuff in the appendices happens after the stuff in the Silmarillion and the stories, right? So those stories happen leading up to the events that they start. So they didn't have to address some of the stuff that happened before, or they could address it in a short bits, but they didn't have the rights to tell the story. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, the point I'm getting at is as they're
to make it as
injecting stuff in from their fandom's point of view, because they want their concept to replace everything else, and that's what this guy's. Even with his bit about, like, he wants to base his community based on. He actually said IRL. Couldn't say in real life like a normal person. He had to say, like. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I've taken many courses in it. It's just fascinating to watch these people's minds, how they're trapped in their, like, ideological bubble.
He's an online personality, internet personality type person. So internet lingo is more used like raffle, rolling on the floor laughing. It's easier to say than rolling on the floor laughing. But
Why would you say ever the latter part fully?
I mean,
Just say I'm laughing, right?
commercials on
Or
that
actually
video.
laugh. You know what I mean? Actually
Yeah.
laugh.
That's also an option.
It's kind of hard to show people you're rolling on the floor laughing when you have a black screen with an AF that looks like ESPN on it.
Yeah, fair enough. But he could do like the other guys and just show his image.
You can't. Well, you could, but for one, not everybody likes that. Two, not everybody has the equipment for that, and there's a whole lot of other things in that regard. But needless to say, he doesn't, and I'm not going to say he has to, because I mean Mahler doesn't. But Mahler is full of emotion, and he can emote through his voice. This guy doesn't really emote that much, but that's him or whatever. But I wanted to make an analogy for like how I understand fandom to be. Is that basically, and I mentioned part of it earlier, where fandom, like let's say the Tolkien fandom, for example, Tolkien laid literally the groundwork of his entire work through the Legendarium and others. And in that Legendarium, he lays this foundation for like a house. And then the fans are like, ooh, I like this. They come over and they slowly are added to this building and become this really grand, epic scale type of building, which, I mean, I always think like a forest castle type thing or something like that he would probably like. Anti-industry and all that jazz. But when somebody who comes in and says, oh, I'm a fan, and then they come in, but I don't like this. So they grab a pickaxe and they start chipping away and they pull out a cube like Minecraft. They pull out a cube of that foundation. And then they're like, I'd rather put this in it. And then they put something else and it's made of like jelly. It's not made of stone. It's not perfectly grafted. It just like slops into it. And it's bad. But then somebody steps in it. And they're like, oh, actually, this doesn't belong here. This isn't what this is. And they're like, oh, are you judging my fandom? And they're like, but you just got here. This isn't even the fandom you're mentioning. You're mentioning this blob that you put here. That's not what the fandom is. And that's, I guess, how I visualize the entirety of what a fandom is that when people come in and change things and then get mad at you because you're like, I don't like these changes because it's not the original. And the original is the fandom. Like, you can't be a fan of something that the original even isn't even that way. Like Wheel of Time with its Wheel on Prime show. It's like we're watching the show going, how is this Wheel of Time? Almost nothing in it, aside from like names, is even remotely close to the actual source material. And anybody could plagiarize that. Or similar, another option is like when the Rings of Prime came out, and then that one author sues Amazon about the rights. When he plagiarized the Legendarium and Tolkien estate to make that, and it's like, you didn't even make the original thing, and you're saying that their fake of your fake is the whole thing, and you deserve $250 million because of it for some reason. And then he gets sued by the Tolkien estate for plagiarism and stuff, which I think is hilarious. But
yeah, nice.
Albeit as it may be, that's
could you maybe then see it as fandom being the infrastructure that connects the fans with the each other, of course, and also the source material? Is that a good analogy, maybe?
I would say that the author is like the foundation, and the source material is like the beams and everything that like ties together, and then the fandom comes up and becomes the walls, the electrical, all the individual parts about it. I guess that makes sense.
I would say that the fandom are the people who are living in the house that the author created.
True.
Right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And so obviously when you're living in close proximity with people, you're going to have issues with those people. But you're not really having an issue with the house itself.
Amongst the fans, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then the anti-fans come in and starts breaking down the house. And then you suddenly have a hole in your wall.
I don't like this 18th century estate. I want to knock it down and build a postmodern.
Well, we haven't even gotten really to the anti-fan like definitions and what they believe an anti-fan is. So you're in for a treat on that one. So I guess we'll go into that.
Part two, with for like everybody. An actual fandom where it's like people are actually a community, and it's not just about only about ourselves.
I would like to point out that his idea of fandom is a community, not people who like the material. Just pointing that out.
Yeah, I noticed.
There's fucking entitled feelings about a thing, right? Which a lot of people seem to prioritize. And yeah, you go far enough down on the spectrum of that entitlement and stuff like that, and you start introducing your really cringe politics, and
because he totally hasn't introduced that in this video.
Exactly.
I mean, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean his name, actual fandom, is quite pretentious already, as if
he's the one true fandom.
He's the one true fandom. Of course, he did say in the beginning, "Oh, I'm not that," but then why name yourself this way? Very strange.
Well, I do find some of the words he used there was very telling of his mindset, right? The idea is saying of people feeling entitled to things. It's like, well, yeah, that's one of the big issues right now, where we have people feel entitled to have their opinions and their views interjected into the author's work, right?
Well, it's not even that, because I did. This is what I paused originally to stop it. He just happened to say the right things where I could finish and move into it. But essentially, he's saying the problem is people feel entitled to opinions. And I'm like, well, fans are entitled to opinions. The problem is when they turn their opinions into the source material. They're saying my opinion is X, because like everybody has a headcanon. Some refuse to make a headcanon beyond the actual canon, and that like the canon is their headcanon. But everybody has a form of headcanon, and that's fine. But when you take that headcanon and you start making like official statements, like Tolkien took Gondor and said that's trans, they're like, no,
That doesn't make any sense.
That's not, well, one, it doesn't make any sense, but two, that's not what he would have done. For one, for his religious beliefs. Two, because as a professor and linguist, he would despise that concept because it wouldn't make any sense to begin with. And he despised the allegory. So why would he throw that in there as an allegory? That wouldn't make any sense. So then they're now interjecting. They feel, quote unquote, entitled to an opinion. And it's okay when they do it. But if you do it to protect the source material, you're in the wrong for some reason.
Well, another absurdity of his position is he feels entitled to his opinion that other people shouldn't be entitled to their opinions. If you think of what he just said. So it's like,
that'd be like me saying I'm entitled to my opinion, but Artarian's not allowed to his.
Yeah.
You know.
I call that flush the toilet bowl logic. Like you
I
go
mean, I
down
call
the
that
drain.
fair, but yes. Anyway, let's continue.
And bigotry and biases and like toxic possessiveness and stuff like that. And that's when you get an anti-fan.
Okay, well, that's really bright, but I would like to point out that all these things, like, oh, well, they're a bigot. I'm like, but if the source material is already written, it's not the fan that's the bigot. If that was the case, it would be the person who wrote the material, which you are allegedly a fan of, which would make you a bigot by default.
The other thing is the possessiveness, right? Like, if you're somebody who wants the source material to remain the source material, you're not possessive over that source material. You don't, because when you're possessive, you claim something as yours.
Mm-hmm.
When you are protective of the source material, that's when you're saying, this is the source material. Do not mess around with it. That's a very different thing, because you are not claiming it as your own. You are standing as a steward over the source material. You are ensuring that the source material remains there for the next generation of fans.
I'd say you specifically keep it unclaimed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's nobody's, but the author's work.
It is somebody's. It's the author's. it's
Yeah,
the
but if the author's dead, then
But even if that's the case, it's still his. It's like when Robert Jordan passed, we didn't say, oh, it's no longer Robert Jordan's world. We'd say, no, it's still Robert Jordan's world. He just never got to tell us personally about the rest of the world. Like, he was getting there, and unfortunately, he didn't make it. But it's still Robert Jordan's. Now, you could say it's the death of the author,
Well,
which is different in that regard. But
there's a higher level to take that, though. Like, because authors die in public domain and all that, right? Tolkien created his construct, or Jordan created his, or Robbie Howard, whoever you want to say, right? Right, and their whole cohesive things, right? Or to use a different example, Einstein set up E equals MC squared. Just because someone's fan head might say it's really E equals MC squared minus 6 doesn't mean they can do it. To just change it arbitrarily, you can't just change what Tolkien created arbitrarily because he constructed it a certain way. You can't change what anyone did because and in other words, we're fans of what they constructed, not fans of what it. You know what I mean? Like, not fans of what everyone else inserted into it. It's why I hate August Derleth, for example, with the Lovecraft stuff. all that nonsense he put into it. You know, like so to me, the core legendarium of anything, not just Tolkien, is a cohesive, kind of like a living construct that once that creator is done with it, unless he did something like with Jordan did with Brandon Sanderson, allowing someone else to contribute to it, right? Or where Robert E. Howard and Lovecraft did have open source on the world, but not in the sense that you would change what they wrote, but you could tell stories in the world. I'm okay with that, right? But when you take the next step and insert all the intersectional stuff or whatever it is, even if it's right wing stuff, right? You change the original cohesive living thing into something else, and then what are you a fan of? You know what I mean? Like what are you a fan of? If like say Gadfly there takes Tolkien and takes something out, puts something in, can I be said to be a fan of that? We have nothing in common with that anymore because he's just changing something else entirely. You know, it's.
I was looking at it from like when you mentioned public domain. Like think of it this way, Pride and Prejudice is created by Jane Austen. So if we were like, okay, well, I'm going to possess this, and it's no longer Jane Austen's, it's now mine. It's like, well, no, it's always going to be Jane Austen's. Well, the fandom wants it. Like, no, it's still Jane Austen's. Like, it's always going to be Jane Austen's baby. Even if Jane Austen's dead, buried for 1,000 years, it's still going to be Jane Austen's work. You coming in and changing stuff would make it cease to be her work for whatever changes you make to it. Like everything that is original that was written by her is hers. If you take it and you change some minor things like, instead of having the normal relationship that was like a heterosexual relationship and you made it, a lesbian relationship or a gay relationship instead, that's not Jane Austen's anymore.
You add zombies to it.
Well, I don't know. That was actually
I was thinking about that.
This ties back into our very first discussion, by the way.
Pride and Prejudice Zombies was never saying it was Pride and Prejudice. It was saying it was Pride and Prejudice parody. What would happen if you added zombies in that time period? That's the difference. I never saw anybody complain about like this isn't actually Pride and Prejudice. I'm like, well, like no one's arguing that it is. It's completely entirely separate from the original. That's fine. They won't do that for Rings of Power. They won't do that for.
It's the difference between based on, inspired by, and this is adaptation of.
We had that big round robin about fan fiction and all that in our very first ever discussion.
Yeah, fan fiction. That's
I will say I don't consider fan fiction or parodies or derived by to be part of the original thing at all.
Yeah,
right.
They're not.
But they're just expressions of our fandom exploring something, but they're not part of the original core thing.
You copy and pasting something. You take their work, plop it over here. So the original's still there, but you took that world, put it over here, and then adjusted it. But you can't adjust the original. The original will always be the original. It's the same argument for like Wheel of Prime, where they're like, well, you always have the books to go back to. Like they are entitled to have a show to themselves, but you're not. You can't have that show. They can. And that makes it weird to me because I'm like, but if like, who are you making the show for? It's like, well, it's for the new people. I'm like, well, the new people don't even know the old story. So having it done the way the original was actually intended to, they'd still be like absorbed into it the same way as everybody else who's a fan of the Wheel of Time would be absorbed into it. They'd be absorbed into it because like, wow, this is really good writing. I like these characters. I like their character growth, their plot. I like how everything's tied together. I like the amazing wide variety of places you can go, the people and cultures you can see. All that stuff is what draws people into the Wheel of Time. But they're like, well, we want to see something new. I'm like, okay, so a small percentage of you want to see something new. The rest of us just want to see the story in a different medium, aka visual. Like I want to see and hear and experience everything. And it's much easier than people give it credit for. But they're like, oh no, we want to see something. I already know what this story ends like, so I want something else. I'm like, that's what fan fiction sites are for. You can go to a fan fiction site, find out a whole bunch of endings in different stories.
That's called picking up a new book.
That too.
Right? Like,
yeah.
But like even like I want to see more about Matt's story at the end of the series. And if somebody writes a fan fiction about it and they do it at least moderately well, I'd read it and I probably would enjoy it. But I'm not going to be like, yeah, this is the original canon. that would be ridiculous. It's not original canon because there's been no official response from, I guess, Harriet and Bandersnatch. They're saying that we have more material for Matt. Therefore,
Yeah.
we're writing another book, and here's Matt's story. We don't have that.
So fan fiction is basically part of the headcanon then that everyone has for this for themselves. Yeah.
But the difference is that
It's
headcanon
not
can be both
actual canon.
or headcanon. Because, like, for me, there's no headcanon for Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, Silmarillion, any of the Legendarium. There's only the canon. But that's in my head, canon is canon. Somebody else's head, they have a variation of it in their head, which is whatever floats your boat and toots your horn. But
so I think there needs to be made a distinction here, because when you say like there's people have their own headcanon and so on and so forth, in my mind what that is everybody sees everything slightly different in their head. But there's
Makes sense.
Hey, Nerdporial, how's it going?
he always makes us starstruck, don't worry. He's the star of the show.
I didn't realize I didn't have the chat going on. But anyways, like, you see things slightly differently, right? So I see Aragorn as being, like 6'3" in my head, whereas Matt sees him as 6'4".
How
So-
dare you? 12.
Small difference, right? But there's a difference between, that is my headcanon is Aragorn and Boromir and Legolas and Gimli were all lovers together. That's a complete alteration of and imposition of something into the story. That, for me, that's a distinction that is made, because when you create a headcanon that is not part of the canon, it's not these minor differences, then you are in your head altering the story completely, and so that's where in my mind, it leads to this development of these ideas of inserting one's headcanon into the canon for other people.
I think some people can, but I don't think it necessarily means that, like, you're going to. Like, if you imagine that Aragorn likes peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily be like, in the canon, he ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like, it doesn't necessarily follow that, but I get your point. Like, it for some people, as it does already, will lead to somebody saying, oh, well, since fan fiction or headcanon fiction or whatever is okay, because no one can tell you it's not, because it's in your head. We don't know what you're thinking about. But if it goes to taking that and saying now everybody else has to accept what is in my head, that's when it goes south really, really, really quickly. And yes, Nerdporial, that is, I mean, I think he does that for all of us. But in our sense, we have him for history. We have Sage for our science aspect. We have Artarian for our theology, and then I guess Matt and I are everything else. I guess
I could be the errata guy.
I'm more of the philosophy person myself, but yeah. So we kind of have the well spread out panel of variety.
And the thing is, like, some
Perfectly
authors
balanced, as all
do
things
such
should
a
be.
like some authors do such a great job constructing what they do, like Tolkien. Like, yes, I would have liked him to have written more of his work, like expand stuff out, or what Chris did at the end with a couple of the books. But what he created was complete to me, to such an extent that there's only like one or two little things I'd be curious about, like, say, in a fanfic, which, like, the one son of Fëanor who was cursed to wander the world forever. I always kind of wondered what Tolkien intended to happen to that guy. You know what I mean? Or in Tolkien, only one or two little things. Whereas, say, in I don't know, Wheel of Time, there's a lot more I'd be curious about what happened outside of the core story that Jordan and Sanderson wrote in the books. You know what I mean? So some authors are like that, where they or creators in general, where what they write or construct is almost complete unto itself, and you're less curious about what else there could be within that setting. You know, whereas others, it's like others make their setting in such a way that you want to explore it in some capacity. Star
Yeah.
Wars, the perfect example for that. You know what I mean? There's such a vibrant universe there, stuff is going on in the background. And Lucas himself, when asked like where did Anakin get his facial scar, he goes he literally said in the EU. Like he literally said that. So like that's why I think some things have an EU that you want to see, and other things have an EU that you don't want to see.
Well, the one thing about like the EU for Star Wars is that it was never like necessarily fan fiction outside of like, I mean, obviously the George Lucas himself didn't make it in that regard, but they were always like really, or at least as far as I'm aware, most if not all of the EU is very cautiously like it holds to the bounds of the universe. Like Star Wars leaves a lot open-ended, like variety of aliens perhaps, or this, that, or the other, how close you could get, or how long it would take to get to the galaxy or whatever. But the thing is that they always stay consistent with the same things. The Force is always the same. The dark side of the Force is always the same. The lightsabers function the same way. Like they don't just magically like do something different that's completely antithetical to how it was already designed. Spaceships work the same way. They still go pew pew in space, which doesn't make sense in our world, obviously, but that's suspension of disbelief, and that's completely fine for the perspective of entertainment value. But everyone completely agrees that noises don't happen in space, so it's fine, it's great. But the whole, like, everything I've read, seen, like with Mara Jade, Kirk Hanos, Quinlan Voss, whatever, like whoever you might pick, it's always been within the bounds, the bounds and confines of the universe's rules that was laid down by George Lucas. And that's the thing is, he approves of that stuff to some extent because they're not going off and contradicting him. If they were contradicting him, he would never support it because he'd be like, that's not how I did this. So in that regard, I would say the fans would have to adapt, because when the universe stays consistent, it's typically okay, and when they pull away from it, it's typically not.
So this is something that I'm bringing up with my class this week. So that last week we did the Trojan War and the Iliad, and this week we're doing the Nestoi and the Odyssey. And there's a lot of academic stuff talking about these things, but one of the things I want to get across is if it's not within the textual body of those works, then it is all supposition and theory crafting. So one of the big things about that is, in a lot of the material we have from the Greeks about those two stories were written from a time period that happened hundreds of years after those stories were created. So the culture of it. So it would be like us talking about something that happened in the 1600s. Culturally, vastly different from now and then. And so there's always going to be that element of them not having the full contextual understanding of the origin of those stories and that time period. And so they are doing a whole lot of speculating and so on and stuff. But if it's not going back to those textual documents, the stories as they are written, and if the evidence is not within those stories, then it is nothing but supposition.
Well, what about if you have a student, like you're going over the Trojan War, and you have a student that's like writing a paper, because you tell them like, hey, write a paper on this, and they're like, okay, so they write their paper, and their paper is including like, instead of building a Trojan horse, because that's a stupid idea, who would ever fall for that, right? Like, instead of doing that, they're like, instead, we're going to have Apache helicopters coming in, and then they're going to lift all the troops off the ground. They're going to fly them over the wall and then drop them in. They're going to take the city. It's going to be great because I can relate to this because that's modern, and Apache helicopters are modern. That's cool. And you'd be like, no, I'm going to give you an F because that's nothing to do with what the story is. And then be like, well, it's just because you're a bigot. You don't truly appreciate Troy.
Well,
So it was like, what?
one of the things I would say there is that the only primary document we particularly have and about the Trojan War is the Iliad, and that doesn't actually go into the entirety of the war. It actually takes place like almost 9 years after the start of the war. So there's a huge section of the war that gets filled in by other stories, of which we do not have primary documentation for. So it's
Yes, but we can say with complete, utter confidence and assurance that Apache helicopters were not part of the Iliad.
yes, we can say that for sure. But the other thing as well that I want to get across to the students is even during those classical Greek time, so 400s BC, there were different opinions about things in the Iliad and the Odyssey. Herodotus wrote in his introduction to his histories the origin of the first conflict between the East and the West, which was the Trojan War, and his reasoning behind that. In Plato's Symposium, a bunch of characters have a debate over the relationship of Achilles and Patroclus. But the thing is with both of those, there's no textual evidence within the Iliad itself to go on about those things. So they superimpose their own ideas onto that work, and that's one of the things that we're talking about here, where it's you have all these people who have their own ideas and they project them and superimpose them onto that work, and by doing so, they fundamentally change the textual, the primary source material itself.
The only thing I can say about that is it's definitely not super what they're adding. So, but
about that,
go ahead.
I was reminded it's not just imposing, like you mentioned, the centuries of differences. We notice with the Bible already a very simple detail is shepherds. A lot of people don't know what shepherds were like in the New times of the New Testament or before. It was actually really you were poor, you didn't own a sheep, you were miserable out in the fields, often cold, you were alone and always on the lookout for danger and on the lookout for danger and alert. And that's a very different contrast to what most people now think of a shepherd. They think, oh, they go out in the fields, farmers close by, you own the sheep, and all that fun. It's lovely. And
You lay down in the grass playing your panpipes.
yeah, you lose the context of things that happen, and it's not a malicious imposition. It's actually things really being lost.
That's the difference like a
or in the
romanticized
context.
versus a historical in that regard. Like we have a romanticized in the modern period of what we see shepherds as, when in reality they're outcasts, they're stinky, they're smelly, nobody wants to be around them because they're around animals all the time, and it's just like that's our romanticized version is, oh, they go sit there, they stroke the fluffy sheep's wool, and then at night they grab a sheep, put them on like a blanket or something, and then they have a campfire or whatever, and all is dandy until the lion shows up. That's the visual we get from the romanticized version of history, as opposed to the historical aspect of history, which is not quite the same.
And that's why teachers are very important in biblical studies, and I'd also say in fandoms like with Tolkien, and that is that we keep the context of the story alive and teach them what it was like, so that there's no false images. Like I mentioned it in the chat, I think last week, that a lot of the times queer is used as a form of strange. That was Tolkien's context. The word was queer, and
Gay means happy.
Gay
Queer
as well, yeah.
yeah, and modern people, they will probably be quite confused by that.
They stole it from us. Basically what happened is they took the words and said, "We're going to make this mean this," and then like that's not what the word means. Like, you bigot. It's like,
Yeah.
no, that's not what the word means. Or if that's what the word means, that means you are strange, which means not normal, which means
Yeah,
not.
they
a good
made
thing.
it they made the derogatory insult their own, like queer. That was used. You're strange. You're weird.
Mhm.
And now they're like, yeah, it means we're gay. We're happy. So it's like they adopted that and tried to change it to lose the negative roots.
I always try to invert the negative on them. Like I'll go, so you're saying that gay people are weird? Is that what you're saying? I mean,
That's the strange confession they do. It's just like, we're strange and abnormal. I'm like, but you want to normalize this in society, right? Like, yes. I'm like, so you want everybody to be strange? Yes. Then it wouldn't be strange because everybody's strange, which means
or
everyone's normal.
that inadvertent truth that one of the liberals mentioned on Twitter the other day, where when affirmative action got upended by the court,
Yeah,
Erica Marsh puts that.
where they say black
She-
people can't make it on their own.
Yeah, Erica
Yeah.
Marsh literally puts out a tweet. What are we gonna do because the black people can't make it on their own?
The ultimate white knight, white savior complex from somebody who's like, I have to do this for them because they can't do it themselves. It's like, but that's not racist at all.
No, it's not, because they want to help.
Whether you
I have-
help or not doesn't mean you ain't racist.
I have a friend I haven't seen in a couple of years, but his response anytime some white liberal does that, or even a liberal does, he always says, "That's awfully white of you to colonize me."
Nice, nice.
Well, it's even worse if it's like this awfully. Well, I'm not gonna say that. I don't want to get banned.
No, but it's all inverting it back on them because they try to take a word like woke. Remember the whole term woke too. It's like all
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we have to think of the word woke in context. It really means when you wake up from sleeping. Just saying.
Yeah. The sleeper has awakened.
Well, let's
They woke up
continue this.
from the
We're 2 minutes in. We're almost an hour in, so we might want to get a little bit more done.
Yeah. I was
2 minutes
looking
and
at it,
27
it's 2
seconds.
minutes, 1 hour almost.
2.5
So
minutes in.
20 minutes would be 10 hours. Yeah.
Yes,
Nice.
midnight. I knew it. Actually, no, it'd be 1 in the morning. Never mind. Anyway, here we go.
I kind of approached this from almost like a film criticism standpoint, because like I did this YouTube thing kind of because I like talking about movies, and I reviewed movies for a while, and I still do review them on my podcast much more casually. But what I noticed was essentially, I noticed people were essentially calling stuff bad before they've seen it, just because maybe a trailer's come out or there's been some casting calls saying, oh, it's bad. And then, making litanies of content, bashing it before they've even seen it. Because that's one of the things that always drove me nuts. Because you can't actually judge something really properly until you've seen it.
True, but you can see the writing on the wall.
Yeah, I was gonna,
That's
like
also true.
you can't fully judge something until you've seen it. However,
You don't have to know a volcano erupting is a bad thing to experience.
but despite it being like we don't have the full thing, therefore we can't know. You can know who's making it. You can know their history of staying consistent with whatever context or source material. If it's original content, are they even staying true to the original content? Are they putting things that seem out of place? That kind of stuff. Like you can do that all just from the history of somebody who has some form of job inquiry in whatever industry it is. It could be a book industry, movie industry, TV show, whatever, video games. But he's like, oh, you can't judge it. I'm like, what do you think a trailer's for? They're trying to get you to judge it by saying this looks exciting. Well, how do you know it's exciting? You haven't watched the whole film yet. It's just like they're making you judge it.
How many
don't-
films out there have had a trailer that have shown such exciting scenes and sequences only for
the movie to die.
only the scenes that made to the trailer being the exciting scenes?
Or
And the
I
rest
mean, the
of the
trailer
film is
usually does
bland.
have all the best stuff in it. Ideally,
And
if they
on
want
top of
good
that-
marketing, probably.
On top of that, some trailers will have content that's not even in the movie. Like
Well, has everyone like
really lying to you to get you to come see the movie.
has everyone here read Dune?
I have not.
I have only watched the first movie that's recently
Okay.
released.
So then I'll be somewhat vague about
It is
this
on my
with-
list
with the
of
Dune
to read.
trailers. There are things in these 2 trailers they've released that spoil events that they shouldn't be spoiling.
Yeah.
And so
Good thing I haven't watched them then.
relying on the new
exactly, yeah.
normies because the normies aren't going to know what's going on in any shape or form. But I would assume that would be
No, but there's a
Corrupt.
shot. What I'm getting at is like in any sort of these trailers when they put them out with trailers, for example, we were talking about, and not just Dune. Like certain things have a shock value to them when they happen, in the movie, let's say, or the book, right? Like, okay, spoilers, people. When Ned Stark gets killed in Game of Thrones, right? You know, like all the
Imagine-
people who,
Wait, what? He dies?
yes, all the people that broke the internet when he did that. All the responses on YouTube, people who never read the books, right? But imagine if they had put Ned kneeling in front of a headsman in the trailer.
Yeah.
They did put a scene close to that. If you got one of the original trailers, it seemed to be
I don't think it would necessarily ruin it if they show him with a headsman as much as if they showed him without a head. That would spoil things because you could always have like he's gonna get his head chopped off and then he survives because Robin Hood swings in and saves the day or something. Like you could have that, so that wouldn't bother me. But if you have like his head on a pike, it's like
I just think
even now you
even
can
part of
is
it.
a dream sequence. Like what happened?
Yeah.
There's ways you could do it, but what I don't like is when like that it's not a dream sequence. Because from what little I know of Dune, it's not like dream based. Where like Wheel of Time has a lot to do with dreams, and in like I'm looking at like book 3 or something, and Egwene's doing her Tel'aran'rhiod dreams or whatever. She's like, I don't know what this means, but she's like literally telling you the plot for the rest of the series. It's just like, oh, I know what that is because I've read the series.
Well,
but
I'll go Wheel of Time with this. Like, they're never going to get there with this stupid TV show, thank God. But one of probably my favorite absolute moment, or one of my 2 favorite moments in the entirety of
Just
the
a
book.
sec, is Nerdporial in the chat still?
no, he
Oh,
left.
no,
He said,
okay.
Nice to see you,
Okay.
Matt, and ask you questions. as well.
It's safe to talk. He's out of there. Okay.
Yeah, well,
This
he
is
had to leave
spoilers
before
for the last 5 books of the Wheel of Time. Okay, right.
Spoiler
One of my
alert!
2 favorite moments, right? When Rand and Nynaeve cleansed Sidon, right? And then when Rand decided not to kill the world. Those are my 2 favorite moments.
I personally was disappointed in that, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully he will choose to do that in the show, but that's a different thing.
I know, right?
My point I'm getting at is, I don't think. I mean, if you're doing the trailer for this, you should in any way hint that those would be occurring. It would, like the entire experience of those events. If through the show were done well, not the crap we have now, right? There are certain events that occur in say Wheel of Time that you could hint at, and it wouldn't be spoilery or ruin it. And I know we're way off topic from these guys, so
we'll try to reel it back in a little bit.
yeah, you rabbit hole me, man. I mean, trailers.
I'm really good at rambling, and I'm also really good at just changing course every second. I'll get back around in the circle. It's a really big circle, so it takes some time.
Trailers that
Sometimes you
ruin
just
things.
circumnavigate the earth, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Like in a list of my pet peeves, there's like this is a weird one, but like there's trailers, right, that ruin things, and then there's like right below that is like when you have a refrigerator with the egg thing built in, you don't put the eggs there. It breaks my mind. Like every time I see a refrigerator that has the built-in egg spot with the egg holder, and people don't use it.
I agree with that fully.
But yeah,
or they have the butter holder with no butter in it in the fridge.
or you put cheese in there instead.
Yeah, but that point again, like there are things like trailer like trailers that ruin things or overly hint, like anger me. to it sometimes when I watch them.
I don't watch trailers, so like if something pops up, I'm just like I hear about it from somebody else because my dad goes sees every single movie under the sun, but my dad also believes that every movie he ever sees is the most amazingest thing ever. And I'm like, that's not how it works, Dad. But he doesn't like when I'm like critical of things. I'm like, but that's just me. Like I'm naturally critical. Like if you give me good content, I'm going to sing its praises to the high heavens. If you give me crappy content, I'm gonna bloody piss
totally,
because it's terrible. But if a bad movie has good things, like Star Wars: The Last Jedi was a terrible film, but it had pretty decent cinematography.
To circle it back to this whole idea of fandom stuff.
Oh yeah,
one of the things I stopped going to films with my social circle around here because all they wanted to do was just go to the movie and love the movie regardless of everything, right? So none of them wanted to talk about the movie aside from how awesome it was.
How amazeballs.
Yeah, and so I just stopped going to the cinema with them because it was like, that's not how I enjoy material. You know, like I love discussing it. I love talking about it. You know, like fans do. Fans love talking about this stuff. But that's sort of not what this modern fandom thing is now, where it's like you go there, what's that clip? Consume product and get ready for next product. You know, you just plug yourself in and
that's my dad.
Just jerk yourself off on how super awesome the thing is, regardless of whether it is or not.
Well, that's the thing is like my dad's literally consume product and prepare to consume next product. That's literally him in a nutshell. And our father-son time period, like when we do activities together, used to be just like go see the movies. But I don't go see the movies with him anymore because every time we come out, every single time he asks me what I thought. I'm like, I don't think you want to know what I thought. But then I would tell him, and then he'd get mad at me. I'm like, why do you get mad at me every time I tell you something when you know that I'm going to have opinions on it, or I'm going to have objective facts about it because it's like that didn't happen, or that doesn't fit in the universe, or that whatever. Every time he will get mad at me, and I'm like, you asked me the question. Every time. Don't ask me if you don't want the answer. Like, if you want me to love the film, you know I'm not going to be the person who just goes into a film and says, it's the best thing ever. I'm not going to do that. But, I mean, especially not recently. I probably would say that about John Wick 4 if I got to go see it, but I haven't got to see it yet. But I also Sisu, I hear, is really good. But even in those types of things, it's like, I'm still going to have a critique of it. But if you go see every movie and never have anything bad to say about it, your opinion is worth nothing. Because every good thing still has things you talk about it and say, this could have been done better. Everything. Even Lord of the Rings trilogy, as fantastic as they are, still had things I had problems with.
Yeah.
But it was still better in its overall, and the things that were changed didn't hurt nearly as much. It wasn't like plot altering or anything. And so when I interact with the fans about Lord of the Rings, the movies, it's normally great content. Unless you get those anti-fans that are like, well, there's too many white people in it. I'm like, that's not even part of the plot. Like, it's not like, hey, how many white people can we fit in a movie? That's not part of the plot. But, I mean, the amount of people from New Zealand, like Kiwis, that were in the film that are not technically white, there's a lot of them, but they're just wearing cosmetics. So what? Like,
well, you gotta have like I learned this young with my family. Like, you gotta have like a different mode for the people who just want to consume and like the popcorners, I guess you would call them.
It's called the theatrical edition.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that too. But I'm saying like a lot of my family just want to like watch a movie, TV show, and enjoy it or not enjoy it. Right? They don't want to talk. They don't really care to talk about all the fandom depths of whatever, you know. Like,
yeah, they're not fans. They're enjoyers of entertainment.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. Yeah. I think I would describe my dad like that.
Yeah, a lot of enjoyers of entertainment.
I tried to steer him into the good movies, though, but you know.
Well, that's the problem. Is like my dad has like the theater pass where he gets to go see as many movies as he wants in a month or whatever, and he'll go see literally everything. If it's Marvel, he loves it. If it's DC, he loves it. I'm just like, you do realize how many of the last Marvel and DC films flopped? Like, they lost money because people are sick and tired of it. Even the normies are sick and tired of this. So if the normies are tired of this,
See,
what do you think the fans are?
That's
What does
one
that
of
mean?
the main issues with a lot of the entertainment stuff nowadays, and I'm including books in this as well now, where the target audience is the lowest common denominator, right? You're trying to appeal to the maximum amount of people possible, instead of trying to find that one market and appeal heavily to that one market and become amazing for that one market. It's all about trying to get the maximum numbers possible.
Unless you're making a movie called Bros, and you're wondering why more than 0.4% of the population doesn't go see it. I wonder why.
Well, once
Why?
again, right? Like
Yes.
they were trying to advertise that movie, and make that movie to be as appealing to as broad an audience as possible. They failed horribly.
Yeah.
But their whole thing was, this is just like your regular rom-com, except it's two dudes, right?
But the problem is the center focus of the entire thing was two dudes. It wasn't, it's funny. It wasn't, here's a storyline that just happens to have two dudes in it. It was two dudes, two dudes, two dudes. And that was the pushing point of it. It's like, that's not how you promote story. I don't go to Tolkien and say, look, it's straight people. Like, so that's a weird way for me to like push something and then expect people who are not of that category. For one, I find humor terrible.
They expect that's they think that's what the general audience of acceptable individuals wants. You know, everybody who doesn't want that is unacceptable.
Well, it's the thing of like the people who aren't of the Alphabet Alliance. They're like, but they're like accepting of it. They're like, oh, I support you guys. It's like, okay, well, you supporting them means that you're going to go see everything that they like. You make sure everything that they ever want comes true through either law or their birthday presents, whatever it could be. Like anything and everything. You're like, I'm an ally because I think you should be able to do X. And it's just like, but not everything that everyone ever mentions is a good thing. Like even just straight people don't always have good ideas. Like you shouldn't be like, I support you. Like you're literally driving a flaming car into a wall full of spikes and it'll impale you and you'll die. I support you. Go for it. Like you don't do that because that would be stupid. So they just jump into the whole concept of just like, I'll support you because you are of classification X. And then that's apparently a good thing.
The the current version of LGBTQ, whatever, blah blah blah. The co-opted version, let's just say, right? The co-opted version, right? You know, they can't accept that when they put a movie like Bros, that's possible to do that in a way that's not gonna bother people, like Brokeback Mountain or whatever that movie was called. Most people kind of enjoyed that. Not like it wasn't a great movie. It was okay, you know. There have been other gay characters in romantic comedies in the past that, you know, or like a Doctor Who, Jack. You know, I mean, you can do these concepts in a way that are not going to tell people, you know, you have to convert your entire way of being. You know what I mean? Well,
even then, I'm pretty sure I remember hearing about them being like, if you don't go see this, you're anti-LGBTQ. And it was like, it's the same thing like Woman King Out and whatever her face is, the main of that. It's just like, if you don't see this, you don't support black female actresses in Hollywood. And I'm like, well, that's really going to bring people to the yard. Like who's going to go see it now? You just ruined any goodwill people might have had. And then we find out how horrible the story like actually is historically versus what they try to...
Yeah, there's a term called blackwashing for that.
Well, I mean, I'd say blackwashing if it was white people and they put
whitewashing is white people. Like the whole thing where the Pan-Africa movement, I think it's called, where they're trying to make Africa and civilizations like as Thomas Sowell pointed out, like your fellow Africans are the ones that captured you and sold you to the slavers, right? Like the Woman King, our tribe is a notorious slaving tribe. That's where this conversation is going. People won't know.
That's what I'm saying. Like the historical event itself
Yeah.
was not the same as what they were trying to portray it as.
Yeah. So it's just.
Anyway, we should probably reel it back in, Gadfly. Where are you, Mr. Shepherd? Come on.
Yeah.
Let's try this.
My mind was going to start talk about the WNBA, and I kept
or
it
the-
quiet.
Yeah. I'll end it this
So
way.
I've done my part to keep this.
I'll take it back to fandom. The single best example of ignorance on behalf of the world people I've ever seen online was when they were doing that. There's that Black Superman movie out there, right? And and a couple of people left with me going, well, there's never been a non-white person to play Superman. And Dean Cain tweets out, like, what? Like,
what am I, chopped liver? Come on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit of variety in that regard, and even if like you were going for a Black Superman, I think somebody wrote a comic about a Black Superman, so like, okay, you could do it, but you say this is whatever this Black Superman's character's name is. You wouldn't say that's Clark Kent, though.
Well, there's two projects out there, so to get this cleared up. There's one where they want to make a Black Kal-El, right, which is Ta-Nehisi Coates' stupid project. And then there's Michael B. Jordan's one where he wants to do a different character who is a Black Kryptonian who, when Superman died, took over for him to follow up and be representative.
I think that would be cool, and I think he'd be a great Superman.
Val Zod, not Val Zod. I'll remember the name later. But the point is, it's a pretty cool storyline, and that's a good way. That's enhancing diversity. That's new. You know what I mean? Yeah. Not Black Aragorn on a Magic the Gathering trading card.
Okay, we're gonna go back because that's a whole topic I could spend another 3 years on. So we're gonna the video.
Did you watch this video, by the way, completely?
Which video?
The one we're watching now.
I watched somebody who watched clips of it, so I know most of it.
I was gonna say I was gonna predict that Black Aragorn trading card would come up in this episode, but we'll see.
It's a couple weeks old, so I don't know if they do or don't because they stick mostly to movies and stuff, but they might. I don't memorize these clips. I just watch them, so I'll remember little bits and stuff. But
rookie
This
mistake.
reviewer I know.
Can you what?
Oh, I said rookie mistake. No, you don't remember them completely.
I'm an old man. I have brain rot. I can't remember things anymore. I'm sorry.
And this guy Bob reminds me of the character in the animated show The Critic.
I don't know what that is.
You don't know?
I was just like, he says, I'm Bob, and I critique movies. I'm like, oh no, it's movie Bob again.
I'll send you a clip later. You'll laugh when you hear his voice and the way he looks. You'll get it.
Are you sure I won't cringe? But
no, The Critic was a pretty good film.
All right, here we go.
Roll the tape.
Dislikes it, and they're reliable. That's about the best you can do, unless you've seen it. But there's also this second angle where even if you've seen it and you've spent all this time bashing on it, you can't turn around on your channel and start saying it's good. So, like if I look at
Geeks and Gamers is about to get a shout out. Just FYI, warning you ahead of time.
Fan, but just an honest person, it's like whenever you go into a movie, you just give it what's the term? You give it an honest
fair shake.
Brain farting on the term. Yeah, fair shake. Yeah. There's a specific term, but go into it with an open mind.
Yeah.
Because I've done my time as a proper film critic, and now I'm more of a casual film critic. I see lots of movies every year. Never ever do I want one to be bad. Not a single guy.
But the problem is that because he doesn't want them to ever be bad, he never sees them as bad.
Yeah.
I could also say I don't want The Witcher Season 3 to be bad, because I love Henry Cavill, I like the source material, but it is just bad.
Well, not just Witcher Season 3, Witcher Season 1, 2, and 3.
Season
one
1
had
was
some decent bits.
Okay. Season
one
2 was just off the rails.
2 was a little bit out there.
A little bit is an understatement.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Well, the thing about having an open mind as well is that means you're set to fall one way or the other, right?
Hello.
So if or that's what the ideal definition should be. You know, you have a blank slate, and you're chalking up the pros and the cons, and as you go along, you find out which one outweighs the other. Usually what I find when people use the term open mind is their meaning think and look for the good only, right? And so,
which if you were to turn it back around on them and say keep an open mind and look for some negatives, they'd be like,
yeah. So that's one of the things that's very, very frustrating in dealing with people. Like, as I mentioned before, and you were talking about your dad, you know, like these people who just go and enjoy the film carte blanche. Doesn't matter if it's the worst piece of trash out there, they still seem to think it's the most amazing thing ever. But then they get upset when you start pointing out the flaws, and it's that part of it that is the aggravating bit to deal with. It's when there's no acceptance of the alternative point of view whatsoever. And usually what happens when there is no acceptance of the alternative point of view is you end up having a situation where
no one improves.
You are condemned for having that alternative point of view.
Well, you live in a bubble. I mean,
uniformity of thought,
and bubbles
completely isolated.
Bubbles become cults.
That's why we pop them. But no,
I mean,
like
it's just you don't end up having a balanced mind either, right?
Well, like my friends and I have a running joke, because even my friends know that like my dad's this way, so we like, his name's Frank, so we go like, don't be such a Frankian, like like we've actually used it as a term, because like it's well known that it's like, oh yeah, your dad is like this, and you're like, well, yeah, and then it's like, oh, so what movie do you like? And now amongst my friends, I'm the critiquer. They'll be like, oh, you're just being harsh on this. Why does this have to be this? Like, two of my closest friends said there's too many white people at the beginning of Wheel of Time. I was like,
what?
There's plenty of not them literally everywhere else in the book. Like,
you could barely see the white people
in the books, not the movies.
Oh, the book. Okay, never mind then.
In the books, like they were saying that the books are too white. I'm like, guys, like out of all the countries, I think maybe like 2 of them are white. The rest of them are maybe 3.
In the
9 countries.
In book 1, they spend almost the entire time in Andor and the 2 Rivers. That's one nation, one state, one country, effectively. And then they go to Shinar. So they go through 2 countries in book 1. How many countries in the world in the late medieval period had a ethnically diverse population?
Well, if you include the Crusades, I mean.
Well, I will often say or point out, in a setting like the Wheel of Time or Dune, for example, they're both set so far in the actual future that what we currently call ethnicities or races would have long since ceased to exist and blended to become something else entirely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the prologue to the Wheel of Time happens in the Age of Legends, and then the story happens 3,000 some odd years after that, or is it more than that?
It's 3,000.
But anyways, that is a huge amount of time for population pockets to spring up. And even when you think of Manetheren was like 2,000 years before the start of the story, which is 2,000 years for a population, i.e. the 2 Rivers, to become homogenous. That is like 100 some odd generations.
Well, not to get too deep into it, because that's literally like a 7-hour video its own, without any disruptions of videos or anything. The ethnicities of countries in the Wheel of Time are described virtually every time they're introduced.
Yeah.
Tyr, its entire setup is described. Kyrian, its entire setup is described. Andor, its entire setup is described. Tar-Valon, with its multicultural, like, trade city national hub of the world, is described as multicultural because it's not a country, it's a location people from other countries come to, which makes sense. No one's upset that they're multicultural.
Because the other thing as well is people often conflate ethnicity and race.
Mm-hmm.
And by race, they're like Asian, black, white, and then Latino, I guess, is the other one.
Oh, no, I hear it's Latinx now.
But like the Slavic ethnicity is very different to the Pictish Scot ethnicity.
They're practically the same thing. They're both white.
Yeah.
And so the Aborigine in Australian ethnicity is very different to the Maasai ethnicity in Africa. And then you also add into that the layer of culture. And that's where a lot of this stuff gets really frustrating to deal with, is because you're dealing with people who conflate race with ethnicity with culture and mix them all together into one category.
Yeah, I've heard some people recently on another Discord server call someone racist for not liking Ukrainians.
When I went to high school, it was a Jesuit high school, but they had one of the classes that was like a once a week class about tolerance or some crap like that. And so I'm an Italian American. I'm also part Sicilian, so I'm a mixed Italian, like you would say, right? And I'm obviously raised Catholic. And there was a kid one of my friends who was an Irish American, and we're kind of chit chatting about our cultural stuff. And the teacher, who was like a way lefty, was like, "But you're both white people." And I'm like, I said out loud, and I don't mean this to anyone listening. I don't mean this in a bad way, okay? But I said, you will never convince most of my or his relatives that Irish people and Italian people are the same, to the point of bloodshed. You will never convince them.
Yeah, there were several rather large gang wars that happened in early American New York state.
At the time of my youth, there were still Irish and Italian mafia types fighting, killing each other where I live. So,
well, it's like I like to tell people, because my family's from Sicily as well, and it's funny because like I tell people, it's like, I'm more African than you are. Like, there's like this little body of water between us. Like, I'm more African than you guys are because you're from somewhere up north.
My Uncle Cliff was coming home from the club one day, and that's where the local mobsters hang out, right? In my old neighborhood. When you time people say the club, you mean where the mobsters hang out. And I was sitting on the porch with two of my cousins, and he goes up, and he meant it seriously, but he knew us. Like, he didn't think badly of us, but he said, "Matt, you're okay because you're a white Sicilian. Nancy, you're getting too much to be a black Sicilian, and Marianne, you're a black Sicilian." Like, it came across as funny culturally to us, but he meant it like 20 years ago. That would have been a very negative statement to way to say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's playful banter in a particular setting of people who understand the context. It's not designed to be harmful to anyone's opinions of each other or disrespectful, which is nice. Yeah. But as for what they're trying to push, is like the differences that we see, like, there's too many white people or whatever. We're like, but there's not. Like, Wheel of Time is probably the most diverse book series I think I've probably ever read, because there's actual true diversity by having sections with different cultures, different ethnicities, different races. That way, when you go there, it's not the same as everywhere else. It's not diverse when everywhere is the same, which is what the Wheel of Primes pretty much has taken fully into account, and why the fans are like, that's not how that works. Like, now you're leaving out all this good content, and you would raise these other cultures up on a pedestal, but instead you're shoving them down, saying you're not any more important than these guys over here. That seems kind of racist to me, but whatever.
I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, China is not very diverse in the show, I'd like to think.
well, as much as I hate them as
I mean,
a concept in the Wheel of Time,
so there's diversity.
my brain just locked. Tuon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Daughter of the
One.
Nine Moons.
Yeah, they're clearly not white. You know what I mean? And they're the most powerful faction other than Rand himself in the show, if you can make the argument. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So-
but they don't like that because they use slaves, right?
Laster's right. He's like, modern notions of diversity are the opposite of what they claim to intend, which
Yep.
is true, because when you're like, I want a show that has natural diversity, you're thinking follow the source material for Wheel of Time. You'll get natural diversity. Like, think of the Band of the Red Hand. It's got literally somebody from everywhere, and it's one big party that all follows the same thing, coin. But they also specifically, explicitly follow Matt because, you know, he's the lucky one. He's the one who doesn't lose. They can make money and less of them die. That's always a bonus. So it's like, hey, all of us we got some from Kyrian, some from Tyr, from Ilion. We got people from every place possible, except for basically Sean Shan.
You,
Obviously, that
Well,
you
places.
can't claim
you know-
your money if you lose, right?
Basically,
As mercenary.
well, I mean, you still get paid technically, otherwise they won't be able to afford keeping you on for the longer term. But you don't get paid if you're dead in a ditch. You know, that's the full thing. It's like, hey, I'm going to follow the person who knows what they're doing. But now modern day people will be like, but he's white. You can't follow him. That's basically slave labor. And it's like, what?
Wow, that's racist.
Thomas
I know.
Sowell wrote a book called White Liberals and Black Rednecks.
Mhm.
And he made a point, I'm paraphrasing that, until the Middle Ages, outside of the Mediterranean and some parts of the Middle East and some trade caravans between Europe and Asia, 95% of human beings didn't even know people with a different skin color or looking best of them existed. So,
Well, I even look at like Wheel of Time where they're like, and Matt sees somebody with super dark skin and he finds it exotic because he's never seen it before. I'm like, but how does he do that if he lives right next door to somebody like that? Like, you can't do that, because then you're ruining the experience he gets, because everybody in his village looks like everybody else. How does Elida look at Rand and say, you look abnormal because your skin is not as dark as everybody else's, but everybody looks the same, so what of it? Why do you have, what's her name from Dragon Reborn, end of the book, Mother Gwenna or something? The one that Nynaeve, Elaine, and Egwene stay with while they get Julian Sandar. It's Julian Sandar's contact to them. But she's like, the guys here in Tyr are talking about, you know, they want a yellow-haired girl. And she's referring to, like, Andorans. Like, oh, blondes are from Andor for the most part. Like, that's what they're known from, coming from that region. Other places, not so much, because they're always expecting it. Like, oh, your hair color reminds me of Andor. It's like, well, if my hair color reminds you of Andor, how does everywhere else have the same hair color? Like, there's so many things that, like, when they cross over, they don't land on the same location because they're not the same. Like, Kyrian people are short, notoriously short. So if you're seeing, like, a bunch of tall people, you'd be like,
Probably not from Kyrian.
Kyrian then. Yeah, it's like you're probably not from Kyrian when you do the super giant tall people. Or like the Tyrants have pointed beards for the most part, because that's the style. Kyrian soldiers shave the front of their head and powder it and stuff. Like, when you do those kind of things and you see people like that, you're like, oh, you're from Kyrian. But if you go to a place that has everybody who looks just like everybody else, guess what? You're not going to know where they're from, because everybody does it. I don't know if you're from Lugard. I don't know if you're from Altara. I don't know if you're from Amadisia, because you all look the same.
And you know what's one of the things about that as well that is fantastic? If you get a bunch of people in the Wheel of Time fandom who cosplay as just regular people in the world, those fans will look at each other and be able to figure out where in Randland their character is supposed to be from, because they're fans. They know the source material. They know those descriptions. So they could look at me and be like, oh, you're kind of like an Illionaire, except your top lip isn't shaved. And you're also kind of blonde, but big bushy beard. That's the Illionaires.
Well, like
But
even
we're all
that,
fans, right? We all know those descriptions, and we all know those descriptions. So when you have somebody who comes in and says, "No, I don't want Illionaires to have big bushy beards," we know that they're not really genuine about.
well, when you say that, because not every Illionaire has the beard underneath, it's just most of them, but pretty much all of them leave the upper lip bare. So we're like, I don't want an Illionaire that has a big luscious
bushy Tom mustache.
like Tom, yeah, like that would be anti-Illionaire in that regard, because then they're not getting anything. But like what you were saying about the fans, when they dress up like people and you're like, oh, I can tell where you're from, it's not just their race, but it's also their cultural clothing and whatnot. Like you can tell, like, oh, that's the style of Tyr, that's the style of Amadisia, that's the style of Gillidan. Like you have the different styles, because when Robert Jordan makes them, he makes them in a bunch of different categories. He makes them from their race is one, their culture is a different one,
So
and their other
imagine somebody shows up to a Wheel of Time convention, and they've got a top knot, they got a big bushy beard with a shaved lip, and they're wearing a veil.
You were born in 3 places at once?
Wow.
What?
Yeah, I in that noticed Shaina Tenchiko, probably, I think. Maybe able to, not sure.
Terabon,
And-
Shakar, and Aelion.
Yeah,
All in one. But then
That's a
they
bit-
dress like a
it's
hippie.
strange.
They dress like a hippie, so they got to be Tuatha on it as well. On top of that,
Oh yeah.
But like the point is, people would look at that and be like, "What are you doing?"
yeah.
Like it's bizarre, it's weird, like, it doesn't fit the world. Like, what is going on there?
If it was
we
intended to be a parody, though, we probably wouldn't, like, we'd probably say, "Oh, that's funny," but
Yeah.
we wouldn't be like, "Oh, like you're serious, right?" Like no one would take that seriously. But if they're going out and saying, "This is what an actual person from X country is like," the
Yeah,
fandom would be like, "I
If they
don't."
dressed up like that and then said, "I'm cosplaying as an AO," like,
Yeah,
an Aiel, really, with a top knot and not a little rat tail with a beard, an Aiel with a beard. What?
you're fighting with a sword. What?
Fighting with a
Well-
sword, and you're veiled when you're not ready to kill, and it's a transparent veil as well. What?
And you always take it off every time you stab somebody? Like, what's going on? Like, there are
But-
things that fans notice about content in their respective fandoms. Shocking. But then you have people who aren't from those fandoms, but they come in saying, I want to update this to fit my modern
And
sensibilities.
so when that bizarre person comes in and people start questioning them, being like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And you say, "Yeah, maybe it's a parody." Yeah, sure, okay. But the fans would question that person because all fans know that person has muddled things up completely. They're not being anti-fans for pointing that out and questioning that person.
Yeah, but it's also like if you go to a con or something, and you like a Comic-Con, and you see like fans bring their favorite outfits for their favorite characters, whatever. If you see a black kid dressed up as Spider-Man, you're not like, okay, he believes necessarily that Peter Parker is black. He's just a black kid that likes Spider-Man enough to represent him, and nobody
So
has.
that was illegal. You couldn't. You weren't supposed to identify with characters that aren't your race, right? Is that how it works?
I think it's just a Europe thing. But when you're going out and saying, I am Peter Parker and this is what Peter Parker looks like, then it's just like, okay, well, now you're stepping beyond the cosplay and into this is how canon needs to be. And that's the difference. But like Spider-Man fans can be like, there's Spider-Man Peter Parker, there's Miles Morales, there's Spider-Gwen, who's kind of iffy. Like, I don't really know much about Spider-Gwen in that regard. Then you have, I think there's like there's Spider-Woman, there's there's the whole Spider-Verse, Spider-Pig and all that stuff. You know who they are by their uniforms. You know who they are by their visuals and stuff. Like even into the Spider-Verse Part 1 and 2, all of the Peter Parkers are white. Like everybody knows them and all refer to him as Spider-Man. But the one Spider-Man that's Peter Parker versus Spider-Man like 2099 or whatever, like even the other ones, despite being variations of Peter Parker, there's always that one original Peter Parker. Everybody else
that's
is like
616 Peter.
yeah. It's just like they're different people, and we're like we know the difference because of their appearance. They try different designs or whatever, and it's the cosplay effect where we're not like they're not all trying to be the same person.
It's one of the reasons why people have such huge issues with the various Batman costumes from the films, right? Because none of the Batman costumes look like other Batman costumes.
Well, they're not technically the same story. They're always
I know, but like they're when somebody's saying, "Oh, this is Batman," it's like the question is like, it's which costume is the Batman wearing? Because he's not wearing the Bat costume. They come up with a new costume for these people, and so the fans look at it and they're like, that doesn't look like Bruce Wayne's Batman getup from whatever
comic
series arc that it's from.
Adam West.
Regardless of how badly the MCU has implemented it, comic fans have always have a long time had the concept of timelines and reboots and alternate worlds and whatever, in it. And like, so I think when they changed, like you mentioned, Spider-Gwen, who's from like towards the 2015 comic storyline, I think where the concept of Into the Spider-Verse came from in the comics, right? Which was actually one of the few good comics Marvel wrote in the last 10 years. So, the point I'm getting is there's all these Spider alternate characters have existed in the comics for decades, and like all different versions of Batman, and that fits what you might expect from a movie or TV show to have these multiversal characters. I said, irregardless of how badly the MCU has implemented it, you're mentally, as a comic fan, kind of expecting an alternate universe character or something like that to show up eventually.
Yeah, but I think like in the way that they were talking about in the video here about like anti-fans versus fans, I would classify fans as those who love and wish to protect the source material, and anti-fans as those who claim to love the source material but want to actually change it into what they find appealing, rather than just going off their own content.
Yeah, I can close that.
Because I mean, an anti-fan is the opposite of fan, because it's the anti-fan.
Mhm.
So if the fan is somebody who's like, I care about this, I actually want this to thrive, I want to share it with everyone, I want everybody to enjoy this content, and here's the content as the author or creator intended it to be, and then you're like, oh, I like this, except for this part, this part, this part, this part, this part, this part. It's just like going through all this, like, then you don't like it because you're saying there's so many problems with it, but you're still here trying to like change it to fit what you want instead of just going and finding that exact same thing somewhere else that is made that way.
The other thing as well is it's not like fans dislike parts of the source material. There are always going to be parts that you just not that keen on, but you love the thing as a whole.
Like the slog.
Yeah, I actually enjoy these books because I read them more as the psychological internal stuff going on, but that's because I'm weird, right?
Sensibilities taking over.
I read for very different things, but yeah, like the slog is one of those things that the Wheel of Time fandom looks at with a sigh and a heavy heart. It's like, I've got to get through this, and but that doesn't mean they don't love the thing as a whole. They love the thing as a whole, and so they would not change the slog.
Some might.
So my point is, they don't want to change the world to fit what they want.
Yeah.
You know,
'Cause, like, I deny that the slog even exists because all I see is character development and personality changes and things that are constantly happening, but people want the action, fast-paced, constant, flashy scenes and stuff. That's what they want. So when they don't see that, they're like, "Oh, it's such a slog. It's hard for me to stick with." I'm like, "It might be hard for you to stick with, but like notice the little nuances of the characters. Notice how Perrin and Fail's relationship alters throughout this, even when it's in the pursuit of. He's so passionately trying to get her, but once he gets her, she's not ever really back. Like the entire encounter changes them to some massive like point. And so it's like that's little details in a long book that you just can gloss over really easily, and then it's a slog.
There was never a slog to me as far as what the fandom refers to as a slog in Wheel of Time. Maybe because I'm a fast reader. I don't know. But
I personally don't think anybody actually thinks of it as a slog. They just consider them not their favorite books,
which is understandable.
And it's like, out of
book 4 is everyone's favorite.
If we include Brandon Sanderson's, out of the 14 books, some of them are going to have to be on the bottom end of rung of the spectrum. For me personally, it's the Brandon Sanderson books that are on the bottom of the.
Just think of Sanderson's books as detailed outlines of Jordan's notes, and you'll be okay.
But
if you think of your favorite book in the Wheel of Time series and it's not New Spring, you're wrong. Just saying.
But it's one of those things where it's like when you are a fan of a material, there's stuff that is your least favorite part of that material. But you still don't. It's still part of that material, so it's still part of that thing that you hold.
Yeah, I despise Egwene, Elaine, Gawain, those characters, like pretty much the entire series, with some minor exceptions. The early points being mostly their exceptions. I despise their lines, but I wouldn't change anything about it because their character being built that way is what allows other things to take place in the story later on in a certain way they take shape in, and it's like. Me saying I want to change that, like I want to write it better than Robert Jordan, would be, well, for one, just hubris, but it would be like it's
arrogance.
No longer, it's no longer. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking that. I played in my head, but it would no longer be Wheel of Time. It would cease to be that and become, my version of it that everybody else would read it and be like, wait, that didn't happen. That's not how that. What is this? Like, why is this changed? Like, it would cease to be the same thing. The word count would be different. The page count would be different. And even if you manage to get those two things the same, but you change something, it's still no longer the same thing.
That would be an impressive feat to get the word and like the word count specifically spot on. Like you'd probably have some broken sentences in there just to make it fit.
I was gonna say try doing the word, page, and letter count and making it exact. That would be like the most amazing feat. I would like if I was the author and somebody did that, I was like, I wouldn't even be mad. I'd be just like, that's impressive. Let's see what these guys finish because they're.
We were watching a video. That's right.
4 minutes in.
A fifth of the way through.
Yep.
Goddamn one. I want to see every single movie be fucking 10 out of 10 brilliant. Because I don't like watching bad movies. But I see plenty of bad movies. But the goal is to just go into it with an open mind. So if
I'd like to point out that if you asked him to like name a bad movie and he names it and you go bigot, just like instantaneously, he would never say anything bad about anything ever again.
Just say that's awfully white of you, bro.
That's awfully white oppression, dude. Sheesh.
if you go into a piece of media with an open mind, I think that's, I think that's, that's what fans should do. That's what honestly most anybody should do. But if you go into it with the idea of just hating it just immediately, if you're going into it hating it because you hate a trailer or because you hate some casting choice, that's an anti.
But no one does that.
Shouldn't have. Well, I mean,
whoa.
Well, okay, maybe a few people.
I am perfectly content to go in and hate everything Ezra Miller has ever done.
Okay, fair enough. Good point. Good point.
Like what, 3 things? Like,
well, that's 10 times too much. That 3 things is 10 times too much.
But that's the exception that proves the rule, right?
This whole thing
I
though
don't know.
goes back to that point I was making of like that person showing up to that convention with that bizarre outfit. If they show you a trailer that everything is off, nothing in the trailer matches with the source material, you know full well that the movie or the show is not going to be faithful to the material.
It only takes one scene in the trailer to tell you that the thing's not going to be faithful. You're like, that never happened in the series, like anywhere. So you're like, oh, it's not faithful by default.
So if you are
Also, a
going into
trailer
this,
can give you a good idea of what level of attention to details they have.
Yeah,
and that usually tells you a lot of stuff about how they think about
or casting
materials.
choice. You know,
Indiana
like
Jones, anyone?
people have been going
Love
on
The Little
about
Mermaid.
the casting of
Yes,
Sheriam for
yes.
season 2 of Wheel of Prime. Right?
Yeah,
That
the
casting.
decision.
I haven't seen Sheriam, but I have seen Varen, and that was a weird one.
Yeah, well, Sheriam is clearly 100% nothing like Sheriam in the book. They've made her a much older woman.
But she's not a redhead or anything, or
Well, they might give her a
not.
wig or something, but
they can't afford wigs. They can't afford it.
a much, much older woman, which shows that they don't have that attention to the detail. Which shows that if they don't have that attention to the detail, they don't have the care putting into adapting the material. If they don't have the care of adapting the material, then it's not going to be a proper adaptation. So, I of course you're going to make judgments based off of the trailers and the casting.
Well, and a fan would, like any fan of the fandom, would be trying to protect the story that they love and they cherish. That's just literally the essence of a fan. If you're not doing that, you're not a fan. You might be like a normie that enjoys, but you're not a fan because you don't care what happens to the story. You don't care what happens to characters. You don't care what happens to the setting. You don't care about the plot. You don't care because you're willing for any and all of it to be changed, and still say you're a fan of it is literally the opposite to a fan.
So here's the other thing as well. Just because something is a bad adaptation does not necessarily mean it is a bad product in and of its own right.
Yeah.
But it's not a good adaptation. And that's one of these things that these people get hooked up on, is when you're making an adaptation of a book, a comic series, whatever, video game, you want it to be an adaptation. You want it to be a good adaptation. So if it's not a good adaptation, then who are you trying to make this movie or TV show for?
Tyrion.
Really? For me? Aw. That's so kind.
Just
make it better.
So they're clearly not making it for the fans, who are the people who love that source material. You're not an anti-fan for not liking something that is not a faithful adaptation, even if it's a good product in its own right.
But his thing was about open-mindedness, right? And I don't think that most people who don't like stuff because it's not faithful to as an adaptation would go in there just to hate it. They would go in there hoping maybe it might be good, even if all the evidence points the other way. But then, obviously, if it's actually bad, then it's,
When Wheel of Prime came out, I had not really followed it. I knew they were doing a series for it, and Amazon had done some good products in the past, so I was mentally, it'll probably be okay. And I remember
Amazon is studios for Amazon. They're different studios. Some studios do really good, others do terrible.
Yeah, no, that's now. I'm just saying what I was thinking at the time, And so I go into watching it, and my brain, like, those that opening little, like, 5-sentence monologue Maureen did, right? The very first phrase she says, my brain says, this is going to be a clusterfuck. The very first, right? My heart said, you got to give him a chance. You got to be open-minded. You got like this could be just a little messed up or whatever, you know.
Mhm.
And so I made it through like the Shad was doing when he was doing the Night Watch. You got to give him a chance. You got to,
Exactly.
you know. I
He
think I
gets
made it through.
too much chance.
When did Moraine murder that guy with the power? When you're not supposed to be able to do that?
Yeah, and,
You know, it was the second episode. You know, leaving out
Yeah.
all the other stuff, I was like, no.
Well, no, she's obviously Black Archer, right?
Yeah, just no. Just please land, kill her now. Just no. You know, like
you're an imposter.
like
Hey, got better.
the only time about the books I've ever felt that way was when Katsune showed up and I wanted a sniper to take her out.
Nice.
Boy, from the moment of that second of the show, I like the whole show was bad. The only to be objective about it, I think parents no, what's his face no, none of it. Like I can't even be objective about it because like eventually every little thing that they do good, like when they mentioned Sidin when they were talking the old tongue in like the 5th episode or whatever, right?
Yeah, that was just a cop out.
Yeah, that was a nostalgia bait type thing, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
You know,
And also, so they could say, "Well, see, we talked about Sidin at
Yeah.
that point."
yeah, like everything, even when you thought they might be okay with something, 4 episodes later they made it bad. You know what I mean? On The Simpsons, there's something called the Mile High Escalator to Nowhere, where they built in Springfield a mile high escalator that just falls off the end of it. It's at the end of one of the monorail episode, and that's what I think of shows like this as. Like you're going up, it looks great view, and then you're just going to fall to your death at the end of it. You know, there's nothing. There's like, but my brain, my heart tried. You know what I mean? Like my brain,
Same.
brain knew from the first clause that was spoken, it was a clusterfuck.
I think of it like it's like going on a date. So you take the movie out for a nice dinner, walk on the beach, romantic, pick them flowers, and you're just like, this could be a really good date. And the entire date, they just like screw up everything, and it just becomes this horrible date. And you're like, but I'm giving you an honest shake. Like I'm trying to make this work, but you're just determined to just crap on everything I love in whole date. Like that's their goal as a film, video game, whatever. Like they don't want to make it good content of what it is. They want to make content what they think fits. Like that's literally what producers do. Producers like, I want this to be this way. Kevin Feige is massively all about that. He doesn't let you pick and choose what you want to do. He says you are doing this. Not like, hey, stick it as close as you can as the material and we'll put it out. That's not what they do.
Yep.
Also, Dungeon Master Blaster says the people working on these projects actively despise the product and the fans that made it big in the first place. Spiteful art is not fun to consume, which is true.
Yeah, that's right.
Mechanical spider. That's funny. Let's continue on.
Man, I'm sorry. There's no other way to describe it. So
There is, because I already did.
so I'll sum it up.
For me, just when you take the word fan by itself, to me that's always been a lot more about like the inner feeling that I personally have towards the media, you know, my own attachment to something. But when I think about the distinction between a fan and an anti-fan, it has more to do with how you engage with it rather than how you like feel about it, because that's a bit difficult to really like discern from people when we're in the discussion of like a fan and an anti-fan. So it's more for me about the engagement, you know, whether you're engaging with the media that you're a fan of positively or negatively. So it's like positively, and that doesn't mean that you like everything or that you have to say something positive about the things that you like. If you're a Star Wars fan, for example, you don't need to like every piece of Star Wars content.
I would say that's true, and I would agree with that. Just because you are a fan, you have to like everything about it, but you have to also protect the fact that you don't like it, but it's still part of the story.
Overall, I'd say his definition is probably quite good, but he will probably apply it wrongly.
Well, let's see how he screws it up.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, exactly.
But wait,
I'm
there's
waiting for
more.
the catch.
right?
Oh, it's coming.
You can be critical of parts of it. You can not like some of it, and you're free to talk about that, because I also think, because positive
My father has proven that false. I am not free to talk about it.
engagement with like something that you're a fan of is not just about dick riding it, or just being positive and only saying it's how it's perfect and everything. It's also about why it's not working for you. You know, it's like why is this not something that I particularly enjoy, even despite being a fan of it. And I guess it comes from, even when you're critical of something that you're a fan of, it comes from a bit of what Bob says, is like it comes from a place of wanting it to be better, you know, loving this franchise, but then not liking something, but it's like you want it to be good, you know, whereas the kind of negative engagement comes from the people who just, I guess, want it to be bad. Especially the easiest people to call anti-fans are like the grifters, because they, you know, they make money off of franchises being bad. You know, the people who talk about wokeness and all this representation.
Talk about you, Matt. They're not talking about me. I'm not a grifter because I don't make any money off of this. So suck it. But
To quote Axl Rose, "Get in the ring, mother."
it's like he starts out pretty strong,
Mhm.
slowly wears off, and I'm like, okay, you're saying these things, but at the exact same time you're pulling away from it because now you're implementing, it's the grifters, it's the people who don't like things. They're out there to make it.
Right. But simply because you're making money off of your opinion for something you like, does that make you an anti-fan? I don't think so.
If that was the case, he would be an anti-fan himself because he makes money. Like all critics make money. Critics make money by default. So if they give it a good review, are they an anti-fan?
Frankly, the ones who take the money to give good reviews make more money.
Yeah, I'd say those probably are more like
yeah.
an anti-fan.
But yeah, the guy was very close to saying what I was saying. But then he kind of, to me, sounds like he's saying that wanting it to be better and changing it to be better is the same thing. Maybe I'm reading too much into what he was saying, but
I don't think he's reading enough into what he's saying.
yeah,
The thing is, his framework comes from the point of view of that anyone who is against woke and like in other words, it's the whole thing that the left does where everyone is to the right is a right winger if they disagree with them, you know. So his whole concept of fan anti-fan is based on the
Everyone
fact
to
that
the right is a fascist. That's their opinion. Yeah.
anyone who disagrees with his way of interpreting something is a grifting anti-fan person.
Yeah, everybody who disagrees with me is literally Hitler.
The Overton window, you know,
Yeah, we all know what that is.
spectrum along the lines of where appropriate dialogue is allowed, and you know, constantly shifting to the one side. But then that means you end up losing a perspective on what the actual center point is, what the actual delineation between liberalism and conservatism is, and what the delineation between libertarian and authoritarian is. I get this all the time in academia, where it's like, politically, I'm actually center-left, libertarian-leaning. But according to where I am on the spectrum compared to everybody else in academia,
You're as far right as it comes.
Basically a Nazi. Yeah.
To an extremist, everyone who is not an extremist is an extremist. Think about it. It's like
If you're not a fascist like me, you're fascist.
that's what they're saying, even though they don't realize they're saying it. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, it's the weird concept, but I mean, when you wear your entire channel, your name and everything is literally about identity politics or anything like in that realm, and you're just like throwing your cards on the table, like Turf Nation. I mean, I'm assuming you guys can read what it says.
Oh yeah.
It's like him starting out as strong as he did was one of those things that I wasn't expecting him to be like, oh, yeah, he's going to start out.
Yeah,
pretty
no,
strong.
same.
I
I
think-
read that name and I thought,
He's the most unhinged person on the panel, and so far he's probably the least unhinged person on the panel. But he eventually, obviously, went off the deep end anyway. But it's like he's playing the politics card, and that's why like I don't necessarily like when pop culture and politics mix, because there's people of different political opinions than me that agree about things like Wheel of Time. Cool. That's the whole point. Is fandom is we're transcending our political views, our other views, to be like, okay, for this thing that we both care about, this is what we care about. Doesn't mean you have to agree with me on every possible thing, economic policies, political policies, whatever. None of that's relevant when it comes to what we care about.
Well, the whole point of fiction, and more specifically fantasy and science fiction, is to explore the deeper concepts of humanity. Fantasy tends to be a lot more introspective. Science fiction tends to be a lot more outrospective. But they're so far removed from the contemporary setting in which the stories are written by their setting that you don't need to understand. You don't have to take that baggage of modern politics or the contemporary politics of the author into those worlds.
Unless you're told.
Well,
I mean, he's anti-industrial. He's pro-religion.
The point though of those things is the stories themselves deal with those deeper concepts. So they don't deal with the environmentalism and religion directly. There's things that everybody can read and connect with without having to without having to be aware of those contemporary things.
Yeah, because a lot of people probably read Tolkien and don't realize that he was very much anti-industrialist, and he was like over the top.
Which is one of the reasons why these types of stories tend to stick around, because they one of the biggest issues with a lot of the modern cinema, television, comics stories is they are so heavily leaning into the modern political sphere that 10 years down the line, people will be reading them being like, what the hell is, like, what the hell even is this? Right? Like,
what is even that?
It's the difference between a timeless and a dated piece of entertainment.
They are
you
entirely dated.
You can watch a modern, I guess it's more modern. It's not currently modern as it is, but like a movie like Rambo, as opposed to like Gone with the Wind. If you watch Rambo, it's got some things like, it's got the modern Vietnam era type thing in it going on, but it doesn't ever be like, you need to be voting this direction, you need to believe this particular thing, you need to be pro this economy, you need to pro that. It doesn't cover any of that, despite being a quote unquote modern piece. It was modern at the time, and it didn't cover any of that kind of stuff. Same thing for all the missing in actions of Chuck Norris. Like they all had this thing where it's like, no, it's the good guys versus the bad guys. It's trying to help these people and hurt these people. You're showing like timeless principles in a modern setting without being modern required. Like, you don't need to know what the current setting is of like when the Vietnam War was taking place to know that people didn't, want to do that. Like like Tolkien is like, I have this thing about fantasy. It's escapism. It's like a man getting free from prison. Like that's his whole thing, is like, it's escapism. It's like, we want to get away from the modernism because that's what we're always in. But then they're like, no, we're going to reel you back into what you're living in. It's like, well, why would I go see your film if you're just going to tell me what I already know? Because I can look outside and see. You're not bringing anything to the table. But when you pull away from that and say, let's just have a bunch of superheroes beat each other up versus like superheroes versus villains, beat each other up, and we find out what's going on and just have a good story and plot line. People are all fine with that because it's exciting. It's something new. It's something they can't experience in real life. But then you're like, Superman's in a modern setting for the time periods when it was released, but it was never like you have to be, a leftist or a right wing or whatever. Like it wasn't the point. The point was the bad guys are trying to harm people and the good guys got to stop it. That's literally it. It's simple. Simple storytelling, not that difficult to do.
Well, see, it's the demonstration of the noble spirit, right?
Well, that's right wing now, so.
That's true. Yeah.
Funny enough.
No, but you just need universal themes in your stories, and then it will be timeless.
Everybody's fascist.
If you mentioned Rambo, John Rambo's character journey, leaving aside the bad final movie, think of Turin in Lord of the Rings.
It's a tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, and the consequences of these soldiers into these wars, and I mean, the whole, like I remember, what was it? I was reading the Unfinished Tales, about how that whole area where men lived were being destroyed by Melkor's forces, people trying to live their lives and just being killed and stuff like that, and having to become soldiers in sort of a counter-revolutionary army, and being driven out of their homes and all that sort of stuff, and when he had to go back and rescue his sister, and all that sort of stuff. And John Rambo's story is a lot like that. The speech at the end of the first movie or book, those who haven't seen First Blood or read the book, it's the very same sentiment Tolkien was expressing with the sort of horrors of war.
Yeah, well, we're once again spewing off into a massive tangent, but I love that.
I don't think it's possible to get away from it at this point.
Well, see, we're taking the shit they made and farming and growing something good out of it.
Oh yeah, we're grifting,
and that does take time, of course.
But like, there's a reason why archetypes and tropes and all that are things, and that's because they deal with a lot of those fundamental ideas and concepts of humanity and those fundamental concepts of how to tell a story. The reason why you have the main character be the farm boy, the shepherd from out in the boonies, is so that you can more easily explore the setting of the world, because he needs things explained to him. He needs to experience things for the first time, and he needs to remark on them. So if you have the main character be the already established hero, prince, king, whatever, who's just going around his country doing the same stuff the farmer hero would have done, it seems weird that he's commenting on all these things, because these are not new things to him. So why is he commenting on them? But then you get into the archetype stuff, the archetype of the king. There's a reason why that's an archetype. He's the healer, provider, protector. There's also the fertility aspect to him, not necessarily that he's going around fertilizing all sorts of people and things, but in the reign of the good king, everything prospers and everything grows, right? And when it's not, he goes and he solves the problem. So there's all these archetypes that characters fall into for a reason. And when you start writing stories to break the archetypes, break away from the tropes, break away all that sort of stuff, you have to replace them with something that is equally as fundamental to the concept of humanity and the concept of stories.
Yep. So let's see if we can get more minutes out of this. Get through.
And then how it's a bad thing. They look for things to get angry about. They're looking forward to the next season of Rings of Power because they know that they'll make a lot of money by calling it.
They know we're watching them.
The worst thing ever, the worst woke garbage, despite never giving it a chance from the beginning. That's something that I see as being an anti-fan, because they're not contributing towards making the media that they're supposed to be fans of better. They profit off of its downfall. That's what they hope for. And that to me is just not something that a fan would do.
So
this is tough.
He was talking about this idea of wanting to make something better.
Right, but don't you do
How
that by destroying the bad stuff?
Yeah. So the people who are very critical of these things like Rings of Power and like Wheel of Prime, which are so clearly horribly written, horribly acted, horribly directed, let alone horrible adaptations. When they're critical of that, they're harming the fandom community by not helping it get better, by pointing out the things that are wrong with it. This is some severe mental gymnastics the person's going on. Yeah.
How I read it was that he was talking specifically about the fandom for Rings of Power, and you're harming it by not helping it grow. If you're endorsing the product, then you can grow a big community that adores Rings of Power, even though it sucks.
Well, it's like you.
I suppose you could see it that way, yeah. That his only goal, or rather, it's not necessarily the product quality that matters, but the community itself that is to be the focus.
But that's never the thing, though. Like, every fandom would agree that the fans are not the focus. It's the story's the focus, and that's why the fans are there to begin with. So for him to say that just seems kind of like silly, because it's like, well, you're not supporting it, you're not giving it a chance. I'm like, but if it was good, and it like, and they'll actually make reference to this at some point in this video. I don't remember which part, but excuse me. There's a part where they basically go after Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers for that topic, and I found it ironic, which I'll point out when I get there. But it's this. Fans are not like fans because of each other. They're fans because of the source material. Like, if Gadfly and I met in a room randomly somewhere and we're both like, we know Lord of the Rings, but we never mentioned Lord of the Rings, we may or may not ever actually hit it off. I'm a very big introvert. I don't like going out and talking to people. I don't like people in general, typically. But if somebody's like, hey, by the way, Lord of the Rings, I'll be like, you called? Like, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, that seems oddly familiar.
What drew us together is Lord of the Rings, or Tolkien in general. Like, that's what brings us together. So Tolkien, or his material and himself, is what brings us together. Not just the fact that he's a fan and I'm a fan. Like, oh, you're a fan? You like something? I like something. Well, let's be fans of something together. Like, that's not what happens. It's like, we like the same thing, but that thing that we like is what brought us together. So when that changes, and I don't like the change, but Gadfly does for some reason, all of a sudden, we don't like the same thing. We're no longer fans of the same community, because he's gone this way, I went this way. And that's how it would be. So the only thing, it's like objectivity versus subjectivity. Objectivity is always consistent, and everybody who's there for the objectivity will be there. But as soon as you're like, I prefer the subjectivity, well, then you break off of the objectivity and go to whatever wishy-washy corner of the earth you're going to follow. And that's just the natural state of just fandoms in general.
Sort of swallow time. I think a lot of anti-fans, if you're watching, you're going to clip this, probably going to come after me for this.
How does he know?
This. I'm going to talk about that first, and then I'll give my idea of what a fan is. So,
honestly, clipping takes too much work, so I wouldn't. Not really. I just take the whole video.
Anti-fans have what I consider to be internalized shame about loving something that is very juvenile, because they feel like.
At least he means that his stuff is juvenile.
No. Juvenile, calling like stuff like Rings of Prime juvenile is an insult to juvenile. Okay, I can still watch a Looney Tunes cartoon and enjoy it once in a while. That's juvenile, right?
How it should have ended Lord of the Rings mode, that's juvenile.
Yeah.
Childish, it's silly, but it's still entertaining and it's fun, and nobody takes it seriously because it's not trying to pretend to be the original. That's the whole point.
What's
Am I
that
an
quote
anti-fan for,
from?
like, inheritance?
I don't know.
Second
Something
generation.
about when I grew up, I put away all childish things,
That's out of
including
context. It's been
It's,
out of context every single time. That's not what it means.
yeah.
Ecclesiastes.
Yeah,
isn't
but
it?
that's not what it actually means. It
But
doesn't
it
mean-
is a good quote.
It's a good quote, but it's in context. You have to read the whole context, and that's not that's people like to use it. It's this whole thing with like Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's taken out of context. It's talking about like surviving pain and suffering for the cause of Christ. It's not about like I can beat the other football team because my team has it. Like, well, their team has the Philippians 4:13 too. So who's gonna win now? Like, it's a tie. I don't know. Like, that's not how people take things out of context all the time. But that people take that one out of all the time, especially when it's like Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire and everything. Like, oh, action figures and comics are for children. Old men shouldn't be using them. And it's just like, oh, shut
Well,
it.
it goes back to the idea of what I was talking about before with the archetypes and all that sort of stuff. The stories have meaning and import. And you think of all the greatest kids' stories from across time, right? You think of all the fairy tales and the fables. Those are still enjoyable by the adults in the room because they still have meaning and import and valuable insight for people to be reminded of. Whereas stuff that is genuinely juvenile is a lot of the stuff that is getting produced nowadays for adults. It has no value, no purpose, no meaning. Like the Velma show. There's nothing insightful or meaningful or purposeful about that aside from being grotesque. So like when he's talking about juvenile and he attributes it to things like fantasy and science fiction and superheroes and stuff, he is misunderstanding the notation of juvenile.
Well, he's using what he thinks it is, but it's one of those things where you can tell somebody is not as educated as they might believe they are because they're using things either out of definition, out of context, or otherwise because it helps promote whatever view they're trying to.
Or establishing his own definition so he can make it mean whatever he wants it to mean.
Like gay and queer.
proper academic mind there. Yeah, I say that with complete irony because...
Yeah, sarcasm is a little too thick there, buddy. I don't think they would catch on.
Everything needs to be modern and adult and oriented towards their kind of the things that they love. Because
he's saying that we want it modern?
Of course not.
No, we're saying we don't want it modern. We want it to be in whatever setting. Now, if the setting is modern, then leave it modern. But if the setting's not modern, then don't make it modern. That's the whole point. We're not going to change the vocabulary of an entire series because they use these and thous to those. And those.
No, but he's talking about the anti-fans right now. They want it modern.
He's talking about us because their perception of anti-fan is what we are.
Yeah, but he's describing his own opinion.
Yeah, he's describing his own opinion, but he believes it's us, which I think is funny because it's literally self-describing.
Yeah, okay.
Is he calling his friends anti-fans because they want it modern?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe his hat's too tight.
And they also want it to be adult, whatever that means.
What is this adult you speak of? I'm only 95, leave me alone.
Exactly.
Because they have shame about liking something that they perceive being made for kids. So as they get older, they slowly get more jaded about things they used to love because they have grown up and the things they love have not. And I think a lot of that is internalized. And they can't grasp the concept that things that are being...
Sorry, just...
I couldn't tell if it was one of the guys he was talking to was saying that it was you.
It's just this idea of fans wanting something to be grown up with them. This anti-fan. That's exactly what I was talking about with Velma. It's a kids show that they made into a very risque adult thing, but it's still incredibly juvenile, right? Like the audience for Velma is not kids.
Mm-hmm.
The audience
As
for
I
Velma,
was saying, he's describing his own opinion.
What gave it away? The TVMA. In other words, kids don't watch this.
but like
Same thing with like what is it? Like Adult Swim shows in general, obviously excluding some anime stuff, are typically made like Metalocalypse is a cartoon. Does that mean it's for kids? Like, well, no, it's a cartoon made for adults.
but it's this idea of taking something that somebody loved as a kid and making it more adult. So it would be like making Avatar: The Last Airbender like a Game of Thrones style show.
Well, no, they tried to make it more adult when doing the Legend of Korra sequel.
But it
That went well.
doesn't work because
It didn't work. That's right.
you fundamentally ignore those aspects, or what happens almost all the time is they fundamentally ignore those aspects that made it a good kids show. And what makes the thing a good kids show is kids and adults can enjoy it. Scooby-Doo was a crazy show. And it's a simple basic show. Looney Tunes as well. But there's a lot of stuff in there that adults can like as well as the kids. So
especially if you grew up on it, like if you grew up watching Tom and Jerry, and then you like later on in life see Tom and Jerry, like, haha, it's still funny. Like you obviously know that that's not how it really works in real life. Same thing with Looney Tunes, the Acme little hammer
Right,
thingy.
well, it's not.
That's not how it works. It's just like you can't just be like, oh gosh, me, I'm 45 years old. I always thought you could run into a tunnel and then peel the tunnel off and then just slam right into it. Like that's not how that works.
So this idea of making something adult, that is very clearly something driven from the left side of the creative spectrum. I say that with air quotes that I can't make because I'm holding a hot cup of tea.
Boom for you. There you go.
But
Don't want to take them down.
when they talk about making something adult, what they mean is injecting a lot of sexuality and grotesque
Imagery.
grotesque imagery, cursing and swearing and all that stuff.
Excessive.
They're not talking about making something more mature, as in dealing with more mature concepts.
Like Invincible, how
Exactly.
Invincible did their stuff. Like Invincible is a cartoon, extremely grotesque imagery, like heavily, and I don't know what you could really run with it. I mean, it's clearly defined as made for adults, and no one's gonna be like, "Oh, I'm shamed because this is for children and I like it, therefore I have to bash it." That's not how it works.
Well, that's an American thing. Like animation is only for kids.
Yeah.
And everyone watches it.
Go watch Grave of the Fireflies and tell me that's for kids.
Yeah, Monty Python did animation.
I actually just bought a Monty Python live vinyl from who knows when, and I was like, I love Monty Python stuff. I have all the Monty Python stuff, the movies and the TV shows. It's great, and I'm like, it's not kids stuff,
No, it's not.
but it's also something that if a kid could potentially listen to and find funny just because it's kind of like slapsticky. They laugh at the slapstick, but the humor is pointed specifically at adult audiences. Well, let's see if we can get more out of this.
Are being made for people that were kids when they loved it. So they try to find reasons behind things that they would not have questioned when they were originally watching.
But if you're a kid and you like something like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and you get older, do you just stop liking Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Like,
Well, he clearly does.
Well, you do when the Michael Bay films come out.
Good point.
I guess you do when you're Matt Walsh, whatever that
Well, it's
guy.
like, yeah, Matt Walsh is a joke.
Mhm.
But then you have things like, I liked Lord of the Rings. I read Lord of the Rings, and I grew up on the Wheel of Time and stuff. Well before the TV show was even a thought in someone's tiny little brain, apparently. But when I got older, I mean, Wheel of Time wasn't exactly kid friendly to begin with, but it wasn't adult, like explicit adult, like George R. R. Martin or something. But as I got older, I didn't like cease to like it because they made a modern thing of it. And just because they make a modern thing of it doesn't mean it's kid friendly. Like Deadpool is not kid friendly. It's obviously made for adults, but it's obviously a comic thing. Well, it's comics, therefore it's for kids. That's not how that works. You got Spawn, not really kid friendly. You've got Ghost Rider, probably not kid friendly. You've got Punisher, definitely not kid friendly. Like there's comic after comic after comic that are not kid friendly. The Authority is not kid friendly. It's just like, why is it just because it's a comic, therefore it has to be for kids? It's just a sheer stupid comment.
And one day I'm making
Things that they love and they're
One day, what?
one that they are making.
Oh,
It
that's
seems.
true.
nostalgic for. So there's a lot of internalized shame in that. So they hate watch stuff because it's not what they loved when they were kids, but they want it to be. And now all they can do is make fun of it because they think that makes them look more mature. It makes them feel like they're above whatever it is they're watching, or that they have grown up and the things that they love have not. And I do believe there's a little bit of that. And that's just in the back of my mind that I think there is a little bit of shame in them for one. And this is why they come after fans like us and other people that love things, because they consider us to be juvenile in their eyes. They consider it to be
No,
silly.
You are
misguided,
juvenile.
evil, and stupid.
Represent today's youth.
Say again.
I said, no, we consider people like you to be misguided, evil, and stupid.
Well, they are
Sometimes
incredibly
all three.
juvenile because juvenile doesn't mean for kids. Juvenile means childish mentality. And when you have these shows that everything is the surface value, surface level, there's no deeper investigation, no deeper critical analysis, nothing that makes a person stop and think. I'm bringing Velma up again because that's a big thing, because that was
Dead horse, don't you?
well, it's not a dead horse. It's got another season, right?
Well, it's a
That's
dead horse.
it. Fuck.
But Scooby-Doo was a kid's show. People were critical of Velma because Velma was taking a kid's show and making an adult show about these kids
Well,
from this kid's show.
Also
that's
kind of
an angle of criticism, but also making it, changing the character of Velma, changing some of the other characters. You could do when I say adult, I don't mean adult like sexual. I'm saying adult as in like drama level. Let's say you could do an adult version of Scooby-Doo that's still respectful to the original.
I mean, they kind of did. That's kind of what the live actions were supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's something that the adults would still be.
Yeah, matter of fact, the Supernatural Scooby-Doo crossover episode. There you go. That's an adult version of Scooby-Doo that was very respectful to the original.
Or the Venture Brothers.
Yeah.
Venture Brothers are very much adult.
But the point is, like,
Boondocks. Or not Boondocks. Not
they
Boondocks.
are juvenile because they're so incredibly shallow and pointless and meaningless, the things that they are producing. So the original Scooby-Doo is less juvenile than Velma, even though it is directly a kids show and Velma is not.
Yeah. Like,
I didn't actually watch Velma, so I don't know.
Yeah, you were lucky.
Don't watch it.
I actually find one of
skip
my
it.
I was
What
not planning on watching it.
One of my favorite cartoons is actually Ed, and Eddie, which. But I love that show, even though it has like amazingly deep, dark, adult content in it. Like it's got such a tragic like setting and everything. It's like really really dark. But as a kid, it's literally just the Three Stooges. That's literally all it is. It's Three Stooges over and over and over again, but in weird, crazy, wacko things that's directed at kids, but adults who watch it can still be like, oh, yeah, I get the reference. I know what that is. And then it makes it fun for both. It's just they typically laugh for different reasons in those regards. But it's I don't know why he keeps bringing up shame. Like shame is something like I don't go to a movie and say like, oh, I felt shame from watching this film. Like who does that? Like nobody in the fandoms are going, man, I felt shame because I actually hate this despite liking it. Like
So
well, if I hate it, then why do I like
being
it?
a little bit of an armchair psychologist, I think a lot of these fellas are doing some projecting.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Is that your inner like
Also,
Jordan Peterson since you're
I think he
Canadian?
just contradicted himself there somewhat, because on the one hand he says that the anti-fans want stuff to be more adult and modern and such, but then also he just said something along the lines of they look at the new thing and then see that it's not the same as what they liked as a child, and then they go hate on it. But then isn't that directly in opposition with them wanting a modern, more adult version of it?
It's becoming a constant theme, apparently.
Youth, because in their eyes, the only youth that matters to them is the one that they saw when they were growing up.
Yeah.
And we have talked about that a little bit with like
Wouldn't that just be called source material?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it
the
is.
whole point. It's the,
It's like it's just source material. Well, we want to change it. I'm like, yes, but you're not even changing it in a good way. You're not doing it like a flowing continuity. You're like literally just the other direction. You don't stick to it. Like Captain America's no longer like pro-American. He's now a pro-Nazi for some reason, and you're just like, oh, okay. And even if you had a good, decent reason for it, doesn't mean people are going to
Oh, no.
like it.
That storyline was worse than that. They said that Captain America always was a Nazi.
What?
That was the retcon.
What?
In the comic, there was a comic retcon where they made Captain, they retconned him as always being a secret Nazi.
That would be.
When was this?
is that because he's a blonde-haired
Is this
blue-eyed
a
fella?
modern new thing or?
Well, it's because he's a white Christian dude who loves his country.
Ah, fair enough.
Well,
Yeah,
about 8 years
that
ago.
does make sense.
Yeah, it was a few years ago, but they did this really crazy thing, and he's going like "Hail Hydra" and all that edgy stuff or whatever. But that would be equivalent of like Superman being anti-human.
I think they
In the world,
they
he's
retconned that retcon really quickly, though, didn't they?
Yeah, no, I can imagine that's
But here's the
probably
thing, though, about
something
that,
they
is that I don't think they're valid storylines to story arcs when they pull away from it. Like Miles Morales is Thor. It's like, well, you can't be Thor and a Spider-Man character at the same freaking time. Hi, yeah, this is Dungeon Investor. Hi, Cummins Gate. It's like you can't be these things. Like I can't be. I have Thor powers, and then in the next issue, you're Miles Morales with spiderweb abilities, and it's like I'm Miles Morales. I'm one of the spider peoples. It's like
Why not both, right?
you
No, it
can't
doesn't
be
work.
both, and you can't
That-
be individually different. Like
That just reveals their whole mentality of tokenizing stuff.
Hot Wings coming in hot
By Odin's Fade, wasn't that one of the lines?
by Odin's Fade, or like the graffiti and like the obvious like stereotyping of African culture. It's just like, oh my gosh, this is more racist than anything I've seen. And the guy's like a pro African thing. I'm like, I don't know.
Well, that's a recurring theme, though, isn't it?
Well, yeah, you can know them by looking at them most of the time, but let's
the
see.
90s being an era that a lot of people our age go back to and go, that was the pinnacle of this type of art when it comes to like comics and animation. So
That's because at a certain point, art ceased to be art and was becoming this blarb of gobbledygoo and stopped being good.
90s and early 2000s.
Yeah.
I believe there's a little bit of shame inside of them. And I also think that they,
He keeps bringing up shame for some reason.
But why would there be shame if you think the original back when you were a child was better and just go watch that instead? Surely then that's the opposite of having shame for liking a childish thing, right? It makes no sense what he's saying.
Well, it does from his point of view. It's shameful not to like the newer, like improved versions as they think of them.
I'm never going to watch new Top Gear. I do not think they are improved.
Didn't they
I'm
cancel
going
that
to
when
stick
What's
to
His
the
Face left the show?
No, Top Gear
I don't-
continued somehow.
They tried to cancel him when he went to another show.
That's why I'm saying when he left the show, it was basically canceled. So
Well, it's like he said or did something, like hit somebody with a sandwich or something. I don't remember what happened.
The
Somebody-
event for which he got fired was that he punched one of the producers while being drunk, because indeed it was some stupid.
Well, he got
incident.
fired from that, but then he went to like Clarkson's Farms thing, and then Amazon saying they're gonna like cancel Clarkson Farms because of something that happened, and then we're like, yeah, in 5 years, and then no one's gonna remember you said you were gonna cancel it. You're gonna just keep it running because it brings you money. Like
Clarkson's Farm and the Grand Tour have been rumored to be cancelled because he basically insulted Meghan Markle and Harry.
Oh, boo-hoo.
I mean, I think we all do that just by existing.
And he said, supposedly he wrote in an article for the Sun, whatever, was that Meghan should go naked through the should be flogged naked through the streets like in Game of Thrones.
That might be an improvement to reality content.
It would be.
Don't want to like anything at the end of the day. I don't think anything that ever comes out.
You know what's more infuriating than anything else? Somebody telling me that I don't want to like something when I'm dying to like something, anything. Like, give me something good. And you're like, you just don't want to like it. I'm like, no, I want to like it, but you won't make it so it's likable.
Wasn't this the other guy's point though, that people wanted to make stuff better because they disliked parts of the stuff?
Yeah.
So we're getting a bit of a dissenting opinion going on here. With
Don't tell them that, they might actually have an argument.
Yeah, but they don't understand.
They don't understand
Probably.
dissension at all. As like Dungeon Master Blaster had mentioned earlier, that iron sharpens iron. They don't get that concept.
Is something they want to like. I even think the stuff that they celebrate, like Super Mario Brothers or Top Gun or whatever it might be, I think in the beginning their initial reaction to it is, how can I dislike this? That's how I think they look at this media. Because the minute they realize that, people may actually like it, the people that support me, I need to pretend that I like it. I need to pretend that it's something that I care about. Because let's be honest, Super Mario Brothers, it made a lot of money, but it was a family-friendly cartoon.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it was.
Based on a huge IP. I mean,
exactly.
Surprise. So, like, what a surprise. People wanted something that wasn't a grotesque mockery of their childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That just means you have internalized shame because of that. That's all it means. You have internalized shame. I think it's funny because when he's mentioning all this stuff, it's like he has this concept where, because you're hating it before it's officially released, you don't have a reason to hate it. Like, you didn't watch the trailers, clearly. And it's like, okay, well, if I'm watching something like a trailer and I'm like, well, I'm not going to make complete judgment until the product comes out, but based off of the trailer, it's not looking pretty. We're like, oh, well, you just hate that because you just want to hate everything. And I'm like, okay, well, what happens if I hate the concept, but it comes out and it's actually really good?
Well, one of the things where we are seeing is a lot of people really blowing up their reviews of things that aren't bad, because we're so used to stuff being just absolute garbage now that when we get, like a 6 or 7 out of 10 film, we're ranting and raving about it because we're so starved for good content that we just, something that's decent, we're over the moon about.
Well, it's like when you got Top Gun, you got John Wick 4, you got Super Mario Bros. Even Guardians of the Galaxy 3 held on for dear life, barely. But like people were so intending to not go see Marvel stuff that Guardians almost flopped. Like that's how sick and tired people are of stuff. It's like you lost all the goodwill because of all the bad stuff you're putting out, even if it's from like a 2-year stutter.
Yeah.
All of
Well,
that's
that's-
causing people not to want to participate because their favorite fandoms or franchises are getting obliterated by the very people who don't care. Like they don't even care about making money because they're not doing it to make money because they're making actively non-money making choices.
Well, that's the other thing that comes into that equation is trust. The audience develops trust in a studio or writer or whatever, and they like if a new Terry Pratchett book came out and it was actually written by Terry Pratchett, I would trust that I would enjoy that book because I trust Terry Pratchett as a writer. But the reverse is true as well. When a new Cassandra Clare book comes out, I trust that it is going to be bad because she has a history of trash writing. And so it's exactly the same with movie studios. There we have a history, a long history in terms of film time now, like 10 years of questionable films. And as we get closer and closer to present day, the number of those questionable films increases. So our trust in the studios, in the writers, in the directors to produce something of quality is already low.
But the shills will say like, oh, well, it made money. It made lots of money. And it's like, even if it made money like Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness or whatever it's called. I almost called it Mom just because that's how Mahler always says it. He calls it Mom. When that came out and it made a lot of money, like, see, it's a good film. I'm like, making money does not make something a good film. Making money means a lot of people went to go see it and they paid money for it. Like that's not all it means.
The example I will give for that is that girl on the streaming girl who made money selling her farts in a jar.
Or
That's not good, but she made money. I mean, that's just because you make money on anything. You know, there are if you mailed a letter to 1 million people and asked for a quarter, at least 1% are likely to send you something. You just to mail me a quarter. Don't even give it something like, just because you can make money on something doesn't make it productive or good or logical or it's that's a vacuous argument when they make that when they claim, well, something made money, the mafia makes money. Well,
there's a history of cult classics, films that did really poorly in the box office that everybody loves.
Kim Jong-un is one of the wealthiest people on the planet. That's the leader of North Korea, for those who don't know.
It's easy to be wealthy when you take every one of your population, your citizens' money and wealth. But like, I did find it funny that as soon as I mentioned, bathwater, Arturian goes over and grabs the glass and starts sipping. But yeah, let's see if we can get a little bit more.
Gonna make a bunch of money, but using that as like a hammer to nail things into other corporations that are doing the exact same thing tells me that they wanted to hate it originally and they had to come up with a reason why they liked it. And we saw that already. Some of the channels did this like hot and cold thing with some of these properties we've seen over the years. So I believe that's what makes an anti-fan. Somebody that just generally has grown out of the things they love and they cannot accept that those things may not be for them anymore. And so they just continue to like this hate cycle. As far as fans go, it's really simple. You love something, you celebrate what you love, you engage with it as a hobby, you love talking about it with your friends, and you're arguing about stuff like who would win a battle, Superman or Captain America, not whether or not one of them is bisexual.
This is exactly what you were talking about, Gadfly, earlier, where fans get together and like to like fan theories, like Pips in the chat. Hail Pips. In terms
Hello,
of like,
Mr. Jarek over there, who's stealing my cultural method of talking, by the way. The reason you don't argue about whether Superman or Catwoman are bisexual is because they're not.
yeah.
That, yes. And also, I think it's their side that inserts this whole topic into the conversation every single time.
It's just like if you don't argue if North Star is gay or straight because he's gay, or you don't just argue. You know what I mean? It's just he's a comic character in Alpha Flight. For those who know, he was one of the first gay characters back in the '80s. When a writer creates something a certain way, right? Like I don't know, all the red-haired people in Wheel of Time who don't exist anymore. Yeah. So.
Like Pips and I don't agree on every like theory crafting. Like him and I have a famous little banter about the Flickr thing with Varen and Rand and all that jazz, and who did it, who could have possibly been. And I'm like, I don't agree with him on that type of stuff, but it's fun. Like Pips is still pretty sweet. Like he's a cool dude. Horse thing, horse. He's a pretty good horse. And we enjoyed, at least for my part, I still enjoy talking to Pips. He might not enjoy talking to me.
You keep it in the context of what Jordan created. You don't just argue,
like we'll throw out theories, and it's like, well, maybe this happened, maybe this didn't happen. Like, but we can narrow it down by like knocking some stuff out until we leave at least a smaller pool than we started at.
Yeah.
So I think what this guy is trying to say is that
one second, Gadfly, 1 second. Pips, we're planning to try to finish the video, which we're about halfway through. We're really trying to get it done, so hopefully not too long. I know Gadfly's got to dip out at some point earlier, probably than the rest of us.
How about we all try not to say anything for 2 more minutes when the video plays? We'll take notes and write it all down.
That'll get us like 14 minutes to do a 20.
Yeah.
See, Pips doesn't like me because we have different opinions. I'm a Yahtzee. But yeah.
So what this guy's argument is essentially going to be, I think, is that it doesn't matter what anybody thinks or what any adaptation makes these characters to be. If you care about the fandom, if you care about the material, it doesn't matter. So if they make Superman or Captain America bisexual in a film, then you are not a fan if you question that. So
despite it bringing absolutely nothing to the story and has no point or anything.
So
it's the community over the source material.
Well, it's not even necessarily the community. In his case, his idea is everybody has their own idea of whether these characters are whatever, and that's fine. That's great. That's fantastic. And so we don't argue about that. But then that comes down to the point of now what are we fans of? We're no longer fans of the same material, as we were saying before. If everybody is allowed to have their own completely different view of what this setting and what the characters are, then we no longer have the same unifying concept to be a community around. Because I've said this so many times now, it makes me feel sick saying it again, but if you make significant changes to the characters, significant changes to the plot, significant changes to the setting, it's no longer the same story at all. So
novel idea. I don't know why it's difficult to understand.
You almost directly quoted Naruto there, by the way. One of the most profound things he ever said the way he beat one of the villains. Spoilers. When the villain goes to him, it's when he's having his final conversation with Pain, and Pain goes, he goes, I inherited this desire for peace. I'm paraphrasing from my sensei Jiraiya. We talked about Jiraiya before, and I'm gonna I may not know how to get there, but I'm going to keep fighting for it, blah, blah, blah. And Payne goes to him very seriously, how do I know you'll won't go back on your word? He goes, because if that happened, then it won't be the same story. It would have changed. You know, he was phrased better in the manga and anime than I did, obviously. But it was when you watch it. I mean, like the Pain, like they should just ended Naruto right after the Pain fight. But anyway, like no, because it was good, but it wasn't as good. Like that was such a peak moment of awesome, that whole up the Pain arc, and it was a profound conversation, and like the whole notion of that. We're real people right now. I mean, at least we claim we are, right? You know, yeah. But there's still a story being told in each of our lives. You know what I mean? And if I'm like 50 years, so I'm kind of set in my ways, but I'm still open minded to change on certain topics, right? But there are fundamental things about me that if I changed, my story would be completely different. If I decided all of a sudden I'm going to be, a communist, right? Just to be extreme about one of them, my entire story changes. You know what I mean? Like Gadfly was saying about a fictional story. The same is true of any story. If you have certain core principles in your life, core decisions, and you change it, or in Star Trek, remember when they split Kirk into angry Kirk and pacifistic Kirk with the transporter accident, and Kirk was like, "That anger is part of what makes me. I'm not part of me. I need the aggression. I need the balance of both. You're a whole story, and if you change even one part of it or take one part of it away, you're not you, and the story is not the story anymore."
There's a really famous quote that I'm about to just totally butcher, but it's essentially saying one cannot be a peaceful man without the great capacity for violence.
Yeah.
So if you can't be like, oh, I'm a peaceful pacifist kind of person. It's like, well, no, you're not. You're just a coward. Because if it came to a position where you needed to defend somebody or yourself, instead of doing that, you would rather run away or give up. Where a person who is truly peaceful is somebody who has the great capacity for violence, but chooses not to. That's what makes a person peaceful. So it's that part of you is like, we're all both we have a great capacity for violence and a great capacity for peace, but we can't be peaceful without having that capacity for violence.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can get another 5 minutes into this before the next pause.
Because that's not an argument that fans would actually have, in my opinion. Because it's just a dumb thing to argue about. But I mean, like, I remember the days when you would argue about like the X-Men versus Teen Titans, and they actually did a crossover and everybody loved it. There was no arguing about what kind of costume a character had or whether or not they dyed their hair or if one of them was coded to be gay. Like, nobody argued about that stuff. But now we've reached a point where that's the topic of conversation.
Because it wasn't the main topic of the entire series.
Exactly. And also, I don't think
changing all of the things that there were about the people in them.
Because these idiots were watching, made it the topic of conversation.
Yeah, that's the irony.
Yeah. Which side always talks about characters that are coded for certain sexualities again?
I
don't quite
the ones
remember.
waving that flag.
Yeah, that's them as usual.
Because I think a lot of these people have grown out of this, and in my opinion, they just need to move on. Especially.
That's what we've been telling you guys for years now. Like, just move on. Like, if you're not going to be a fan of something as it is, move on. Like, that's the whole reason gatekeeping even exists to begin with, is because they refuse to move on from whatever the topic.
Especially with like the Star Wars fandom, it's extremely toxic.
No. No. Star Wars fans are not toxic. Star Wars fans are passionate. There's a difference. Same thing. Like, are you going to say that Tolkien fans are toxic because they didn't embrace the Rings of Power? No.
Yes, he's going to say that.
He's going to say it, but I mean,
yes.
In reality, that's not the case, because like I hear people say all the time, like, well, Star Wars is patriarchal. I'm like, you do realize that in the EU, like, the number one favorite character out of everything isn't Luke Skywalker. It isn't Darth Vader. It's not Han Solo. It's freaking Mara Jade. It's a redhead literally Black Widow of Star Wars. Like she's the
I
most favorite.
I
Of
love
all.
Mara Jade so much as a character that when that bastard Jason Solo killed her, I literally took all of my Star Wars novels, lit the barbecue up, and burned them. Even
That's you're a pro censorship commie. That's why.
I was angry for days. Like people thought I was going to kill people. I was so angry about it. Like I would just walk around, Jason. I would just, man, I just couldn't. But anyway, point is, she's a popular
Welcome
character.
to the Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah.
Fandom stuff has been in my, I've been surrounded by it. Literally, my earliest memories are like, Star Wars and stuff like
He's born to the theme song of Star Wars.
that. My older brothers were deep into that stuff when I came along, and like, we had conversations like you're talking about. Like we would get very impassioned about like what superhero could do what, and of course I would always lose the argument because my brother knew more about the stuff than me. Which is kind of where I started originally.
But he can't know more than you if he's not relying on source material.
It's quite possible your brother still may know more than you based on this video.
It's the little things that kill me.
Yes, Pips, welcome to one of these streams.
Not liking this idea of gatekeeping and like people lording information over somebody. But like still we would have arguments about who could win, but it was always like based on the characters and based on what's right there on the page, and not like some idea of some
It was based on the source material. No duh. Done.
Yeah, Pips, he's been struggling with that for a couple hours. It's just set up.
Does he talk about me?
Yeah.
Okay, because I went into the settings, I went to audio, and I like cranked that sucker up all the flipping way, and I don't know how to make it any louder.
Do you? You might want to just play with it. Maybe it's just the way you have this. You said before how you have the capture audio thing set up.
Could it be the mic automatically adjusts volume?
I turned that off.
Okay, then I have no idea why it does that.
It screws with voice meter, so yeah. Unfortunately, I try to practically eat the microphone, just like just so people can hear me. It's like, hey, but I'm also naturally loud because I'm Italian, but it's just unfortunately the nature of the beast in that regard. So I'm trying, Pips. Unfortunately, voice meter doesn't let me run through OBS. Otherwise, I would have it a lot louder and it'd be much easier to do and clean up.
Fucking force of agenda being put into it, and representing something that isn't there on the page, and I don't know, man. It's really weird. It's like when I started seeing that stuff popping up in Fandom, it was really bizarre to me, and that's kind of what led me down this path of like wanting to understand it at first, and like wanting to, originally I was like, when I started seeing stuff claims by like Comicsgate and whatnot, I'm like, I was not reading comics at the time, so I was like, whoa, are they really doing this, like, making comics bad because they're blah blah blah, and I'm start reading comics again. So like, really, thank you Comicsgate for one thing, because I look into it, I'm like, wait a second, no, some of these comics are bad or not for me.
He's a bigot.
Some of them aren't very good. Some of them are great. I'm not seeing anything that's representative of what they're saying that's anything out of the ordinary. Like, yes, there was a push for, in Marvel in particular, they, introduced a lot of people of color and female characters, versions, legacy characters.
That's not the problem. The problem is,
Could this be a case of shit taste, maybe?
Actually, no, I will need to correct him. They did not introduce a lot of people of color or women characters. They took existing male white characters and turned them into people of color. And
it's like they didn't do it the right way. They should have introduced more characters. They should have added new stories and things that were original plots. That's what people would have enjoyed. We wouldn't have nobody would have a problem with new characters and stuff. They might not be popular across the board or whatever, but that's the reason they co-opted the current stuff. That's the nature of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, it's the whole case of Pips. The whole case of trying to have a pre-established audience for a new concept. And this is what a lot of my issues with the Wheel of Prime is. Like there seems to be a lot of people who worked on that show wanting to make their name, as opposed to instead of making an adaptation of the show. So the costume designers, instead of wanting to make the costumes as close as described, thought, I want to make some ostentatious, cool thing that will really get my name out there. And so they came out with the cheese grater face mask for the Shan-Chan. But like, so they have their own idea of their own story that they want to sell, their own idea for their own characters, but they don't have the capacity to write it or to sell it, and so they butcher an existing character or IP and skin it and put it on their own establishment as a skin suit to shove it in there. And so a lot of it is not about creating or adapting materials. It's about people wanting to create their own things, but not having the skill set to do so. And so they take something and change it instead.
Those that can do, those that can't, diversify others' works.
True.
Evil cannot create, it can only corrupt that which good forces have made, perhaps.
It's like Aru Iluvatar made all the good stuff, and obviously Melkor screwed everything else up.
And stuff. And that to me was just like, oh, cool. So they're actually doing something they should have been doing a long time ago. You know,
which just reveals that he wasn't a. It just reveals he
Exactly,
wasn't a fan
yeah.
of the original stuff, anyways.
So actually, AF anti-fan, quite correct seems.
I know I meant that one at the beginning, just for is the future foresight.
I think it stands for something else, but I can't say it on the stream.
Thank you. I don't want to get demonetized. I'm not even monetized to begin with. Anyway.
On the Fatcast, we talked about the comics code and why that was actually a big part of why that stuff was not introduced in comics more regularly before that. But yeah, it's
I thought it was because people wanted to make money, but that could be wrong.
It's like their own version of coping. Like their engagement with these things now is them coping with the fact that it's not made for them anymore.
Yeah,
That's pretty much what it is.
No, I did not say this. It's not what I said at all. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll respond to that later.
No. I now it's all coming to my mind. Like I'm sort of like just thinking about it a little bit on what you said. Is I think all of this anti-fandom rhetoric we see is a cope. I think it's
Here
like
it comes. Here it comes.
You're not making stuff for me anymore. You're making it for a younger generation, and now I'm going to be mad at it.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it is.
Pure cope.
I don't know who that is, by the way. So
Set me up.
So they say that other people are coping to what they're saying, but they're just telling on themselves, really, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it all ties into like I've got a underlying theory that I've been endlessly fascinated with what makes people human beings. We're generally the same thing, more or less, and like how can one be like what we are, what we advocate for, and one be like a fascist, right? How does that happen?
Oh my God. There it is, right there. Like you could can that. That should be canned. Like that's a 20-second quote. Basically, there's us and everyone else is fascists.
you could can that and sell it like farts.
So there have been a couple things here. One, it's like the fans of the original material are upset that the material isn't being written for them anymore. Meaning, the fans are upset that the material isn't being written for the fans. how is that coping? How is that a
Well, they're all fascists, so
yeah?
It
But
is
it's like
coping because they are coping about their shitty material.
it's like so. But shouldn't the writers and directors and producers be making stuff for the fans? Is that not
Ideally, yes.
Yeah. And
Okay,
that's what the whole gripe is. So he's got the gripe correct, but his point of view is that the source material doesn't matter. Only bringing new people into the fandom matters, and you do that however you can. And if people dislike the new stuff, then well, they're not the real fans. So he's completely ignoring the fact that the material is being purposefully changed and altered in order to attract new people. But
Not altered as in good story.
yeah, but that doesn't make sense, because new people have always been coming to these franchises. New people always discover Tolkien and always come to love Tolkien, and it'll be the same for Robert Jordan. New people will discover those books and love those books, and it was the same for the comics, Batman, Superman. People loved those characters because those characters were those characters. And now when they change them, you're actually changing what you want those characters to be, so they are no longer the same characters. I don't understand how they can. It's a complete mental disconnect on their part that
they don't see. They don't value the integrity of the legendarium, so to speak.
Yeah,
like they see it just as like, okay, to be Italian about it. Like I always say, there's great pizza and everything else, right? So like there's not. I mean, I will have a Domino's occasionally or over a local pizzeria or whatever, but they kind of taste the same. And there's that one place that's really expensive that has the great pizza. You know what I mean? Can't always afford to get it, right?
Papa Murphy?
Well, you know what I mean. Like the point I'm getting is they see all pizza as the same. So, like when you're making these MCU movies, that like the first couple that were really good, let's say, versus the ones that have sucked for the past 4 or 5, right? They say, well, it's all in the same thing. It's all kind of the same. In other words,
it's the shallow surface level adherence to the product. It's not an appreciation of any of the meat and potatoes of things. So for a pizza, for example, it's them saying, well, there's dough, there's sauce, there's cheese, it's a pizza, without realizing that there's a vast difference in what you can do with the dough, the sauce, and the cheese.
Yeah, they're just happy to have a pizza and not necessarily,
So it's not a fan of the material itself. It's a surface level attachment to a concept. This is it entirely. They love the fandom because they love having the community, but they don't like the material, or they don't care for the material. That's exactly what these people are describing.
So you're saying they are anti-pineapple on pizza and we're the pro-pineapple on pizza?
I am.
That's too politically loaded a question for me right now.
Yeah, no, I'm going to abstain from that vote.
A bunch of cowards.
Someone was trying to give my grandfather a pizza with pineapple on it, and he literally set it on fire.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you have to cook it. So.
Well, he's. I'm talking more like lighter fluid and burning it. He's Sicilian. There's no pineapple on pizza.
To answer
I
that
will
question,
eat pineapple on pizza.
If the flavor profile of the dough, the sauce, and the cheese works with pineapple, then it works. But if it doesn't, it really doesn't.
That also depends on who makes it and what kind they're using. Because I've seen some people they put it on there, and I'm like, did you put anything on there but pineapple? It's obviously gonna be super sweet, but like you mix it properly, like Canadian bacon, like a Hawaiian pizza, Canadian bacon with pineapple, with plenty of cheese, sauce, maybe add a couple
Ham.
beef on it. Yeah, just like that's what Canadian bacon is.
Well, that not in Canada.
Well, that's because Canada's wrong.
Well, we're wrong about a lot of things right now. I'm not going to lie about that.
Just be careful. If you're too wrong, they might euthanasia you. So,
Yeah.
Stub your
Yeah.
toe? Have you thought about dying?
I'm not dead yet. I feel happy.
Your opinions might make you depressed. Have you thought about euthanasia?
Are you straight? Have you thought about euthanasia?
Yikes.
You're not
Got
depressed
to
yet?
like emotional intelligence, or maturity, if you want to call it that, and just like an underdeveloped sense of it. And that speaks to what you were saying, DJ, about like that shame, because shame is something that if you don't have like some sense of developed emotional, maturity, you're not going to process that shame well. Yeah.
These are the guys who literally scream at the sky because their favorite character is not gay. Like, mature. What maturity are you talking about?
It wasn't because of their deaths.
Everybody has shame, but like if you don't know what to do with it,
I have no shame. I'm just putting that out there right now. I have no shame.
you just kind of stuff it down, and you're gonna react
It's
pretty
June. Be
shitty.
proud of what you love. It's June. Be proud of what you love. There's no reason.
The guy with the proud watch and a proud sweat.
I mean, yeah, be proud of what you love, but don't be proud of what you don't love, right? I guess.
Well, if you love your child, there's going to be things that are irritating about your child, but you're not going to hack off body parts of them, right?
Wow.
If what irritates you about them is that that's not trans, then yes, you would.
See, I think what Gadfly said about loving his child is not the same thing as what the LGBTQBDRZ whatever.
You missed a
Don't worry
couple
about it.
billion letters there. Just saying.
No,
The
just say
rainbow
plus.
call?
It's done, right?
Reason to be
Too
ashamed
late.
about it. So it's a prideful month. But I also
That's the problem.
feel like it's like when you're around a certain group of friends and you know that they don't like something, and you're the
Yeah.
one person that likes it, and you're like, "Oh no, that stuff is silly. I don't watch that anymore." And then you're secretly, going home streaming it after the party.
Yeah.
That's what it reminds me of, is that you're putting on this illusion that you don't, or that you can't possibly like that because you're grown up now, and so
How much do we want to bet this guy's an Ezra Miller fan?
I don't want to lose money.
Well, if
It
I
sounds like
bet
something
you
you don't watch
$1,
the
that'll
video.
probably get me about 2,000 if he's not. So
Well, if you send me $1 like everybody else sends me $1 instead of quarters, I could actually probably retire or have a better setup. Probably closer to set up your YouTube than retire. I'm not going to be that rich.
It's it's in that way, like in a way, I'm kind of I've a lot of ways actually. I'm grateful that I am on the spectrum because I think that is like a big reason why I've just not had that concern for the most part. I mean, I definitely when I was
Must be lucky because I'm on the spectrum and I have.
I mean, that explains a lot, to be honest, about his opinions. Right now, it suddenly all makes sense.
Well, I mean, like,
this is
I'm on the spectrum, but I'm on the complete opposite side of
Yeah.
that he is.
But he's looking for the inclusion that represents himself.
And I'm looking for the good story, and I'm being more disappointed than he is.
Mhm.
I was like in middle school maybe when I was really insecure and shit, puberty
What middle schooler isn't? Like, let's be honest.
and all that. Like I definitely tried to hide my nerdiness and whatnot a lot more. But like
Yeah.
other than that, I'm just like, dude, I don't give a fuck. You don't like this shit. I think it's awesome.
I think that it's
And nobody cares if you think it's awesome. The problem is we think you think it's actually like canon and good.
well, we care because you are yelling at us to think it's awesome, and that if we don't think it's awesome, then there's a problem with us.
Couldn't possibly be a problem
Yep.
with them.
fans also, you don't advocate for something to not exist. I mean, I think that's
If it's bad, you do. that's the point.
Yeah.
I love something so much, I'd rather it not exist then you destroy it and
I-
make that the last memory I have of it.
I was solidly
Willow
disagree with you on
series.
that one. I'm okay with, like I said to people about Rings of Prime and Wheel of Prime. If they were doing a show and said, we're doing this for the woke community, we know it's not for everyone else, I'd be like, okay, you know, I'm not going to watch it. You told me ahead of time it's not for me. You know what I mean? Live and let live. But they, like you were saying before,
I
they're
would
not
agree
living and let living.
only under the requirement that they also make it so we can make one that we can enjoy.
Well, that's my point.
Exclusive
You
for
know what I
them
mean?
for the next 60 years. I'm like, you're saying I have to go the rest of my life without ever seeing this on the screen
But
in a
that's my
faithful
point.
adaptation?
So
That's my point.
my issue with the core concept of this argument is that the argument he's making is that everybody's individual interpretation of the source material is valid and good and acceptable.
Unless it's intolerant, then it's not.
But the point where we're coming from is if it's not the source material, it's not the source material.
Yeah.
So you can make as many ridiculous changes as you want, but it's not the source material, so it will not be that thing. And this is the issue I had with that conference panel, right, where the guy was making the argument that because there were various drafts of the Silmarillion in the work, every interpretation of the Silmarillion was great and valid, and doesn't that make this such an amazing broad spectrum idea thing? And it's
No, it makes it confusing.
Well, they were medieval, so they had to be right, you know.
The crazy thing is I've mentioned it earlier on this stream as well, but like we as fans, as like actual fans of the material, do not consider it our thing. We are just the current holders of that thing. We are the stewards of that thing, the guardians of that thing, and we have it ready to pass on to the next generation.
Gatekeepers.
And that's very different to this idea of, well, I'm going to take this and make it mine and change it and alter it, and isn't that great and wonderful, and look at this amazing thing that is what is the actual material that these people say they're doing.
Well, it's like gatekeepers. I grew up thinking gatekeepers were terrible people because I wanted to get into new things. I wanted to enjoy Wheel of Time, but I didn't have nobody to talk to. Nobody would talk to me.
The whole point of a gatekeeper
is to allow people in too.
Is to allow people in and to prevent the people who are going to harm that community from coming into that community.
Like if Troy had a true gatekeeper, they wouldn't have brought a horse in.
Well, they did, but it required divine intervention to stop that person from doing their job.
Basically, it's called ego.
Completely unethical as a fan. Like to go, hey, the stuff that I love isn't happening anymore, so you can't have the thing that you love.
The thing is, you're not having what you love. You have what I love, and then they're twisting it, so it's no longer what I love. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's just a weird way to look at something.
Well, then there's also the question of, is it even true that it's not happening anymore, or is it that you have changed in a way that you aren't fully cognizant of, right? Which I think is often the
And don't forget, you're unethical because you don't agree with them.
case these days.
Yeah,
true.
And because like nostalgia is a very strong thing. Like I've plenty of times gone back to like play a video game from my childhood, being like, oh, this is the best game of all time, and it's like horrendous, and like it just doesn't hit. And like sometimes you just grow. You grow apart from the things that you used to like a lot, and it can be difficult.
Just stop it here for a second. So he's comparing a game that he played a long time ago that he hasn't gone back to play over and over and over again, and one day decides to go back and thinks it's garbage. That's very different to, for example, those people who play the same game over and over and over again. Like me reading The Lord of the Rings every 2 years, or The Wheel of Time every 2 years. That's very different to somebody who reads it once and then 20 years later comes back to it and is like, oh, I guess this isn't as good as I thought it was.
But
You know,
also-
that first person isn't what I would call, or that person who comes back after a long break isn't what I would call a fan of the material.
Mhm.
They're not somebody who passionately loves and re-engages with the material on a regular basis.
I mean, I go through Wheel of Time probably twice a year at minimum. So
Wow, that's a lot. But to be fair, even if you don't constantly reread or replay a game, you can still be a fan of that. And this
Well,
just means he
when you're-
wasn't, right?
You're engaging
I can
with the material,
go back
right?
and
That's-
play, I don't know, Pokemon Sapphire, for example, and
Well-
I'm sure it will hold up perfectly fine.
What I mean is by you're engaging with the material regularly, right? It's something that you that occupies time out of your life when you are not experiencing it for the first time, right?
playability.
So there's regular regular time spent with this material, as opposed to done it once, maybe twice, off the slate, not thinking about it, not engaging with it, coming back 10 years later and being like, oh, I don't remember this. It's like, of course you don't remember it. You weren't engaging with it.
Well, it's probably like how most people.
But I
play
think
it.
if you genuinely liked it back then, there is very little chance you won't like it if you look back to it.
It might be different of an experience though, because you've experienced newer things like better graphics, better soundtracks, better quality. But it'll still be the thing that you're like, man, I really want to go back and play that. Like one of the first computer games I ever played was MechWarrior 2. And anytime I get the chance, I'm like, I go back and I'm like, man, this is like graphically horrible comparative to it. But I can remember when I first played it, and it looked like freaking futuristic sci-fi. Like it was crazy amazing, and
Well,
the soundtrack's fire. So it's like,
Think of like Doom and Quake. People love those games so much they play them over and over and over again. Even now, when you have all the realistic first-person shooters out there, they still love those crazy pixelated messes because they just it engages with you in a different way.
Not the other limitations that people deem to be a good quality game. Like nowadays, if you don't have good graphics, it's not a good game. But I play games like Hero Siege, and Hero Siege is pixel based, but the gameplay's fun, so it always brings me back.
Yeah, it's actually one of the reasons why I find less enjoyment with some of the modern versions of games. Like the Pokemon games, the more recent ones, I don't enjoy them as much, but I still enjoy the older ones. I enjoy the pixelated ones. Same with the Fire Emblem games. The more recent ones, I don't enjoy them as much, but the older pixelated ones, I like them a lot more. And part of that is because of the changes in the gameplay and changes in the overall style and presentation of the material.
I actually recently went back and started playing some old Fire Emblem games again, and damn, they were a lot more difficult than I remember.
Absolutely.
Probably mainly due to the new ones being so super simple.
Yeah.
Well, it's also the same. Like I remember when I was in high school, I played Need for Speed Underground 2, best hands down in the entire franchise, and
Yeah.
I have it, and I went over, played it on my Xbox, and I was like, I can't drive straight to save my life. Like I just kept drifting around, and I was like, just go straight. Like seriously, this is not difficult. I'm like, how did I play this game and be really good at it when I was a kid, and now I can't do it? But it's still a fun game because of the customization and all the other fun aspects of it. It's just I could not for the life of me figure out how I was playing. Hey, Dungeon
Yeah,
Master.
generally, the newer games nowadays, they're generally way too easy.
Yeah, there's
And
less focus on
there is not
gameplay.
enough good gameplay. Yeah.
Gameplay is the thing that matters the most because if you don't have gameplay, the rest of it's trash.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what like literally like Last of Us. People are gonna play the Last of Us, and then what? They're never gonna play it again. They're gonna remember some of it, but they'll
See,
never touch the game
the
again.
other thing as well is like some of the games that are like the worst in terms of technical modern gameplay, the point and
Skyrim.
click adventures. Point and click adventures are fantastic. I love them so much. Like the Monkey Island series, they're so great. The writing in them is fantastic, but that type of gameplay is something that is no longer presented nowadays because people are for whatever, they just don't think that is a valid type of gameplay anymore. But yeah, the Quest for Glory games, I love those. The King's Quest, the Space Quest games, I love them so much. They're so much fun. And even though I have played them all and beat them all, and could probably do like speed runs for some of them, I don't like. I will still go back and play them because they are really fun and enjoyable.
Yeah. I don't know if Arturian, you want to bounce now before you pass out, or
10 minutes or so.
okay. Well, maybe we can get through the last 3 minutes of this video. I don't make promises though.
Difficult,
Mhm.
but it's like,
Yeah.
but some people just choose to cope with it in really harmful ways, both for other people but also for themselves.
Batman Forever was my favorite movie ever for a little while. Okay, like it's we all grow.
I in my mind, I was just thinking how Final Fantasy VII, great fucking story, but you look back on the graphics of that game.
Yeah. No, for me it was Thundercats. I loved Thundercats as a kid, right? And the newer versions came out, and I was like, oh man, it makes me want to go back because I have all of the DVDs. So I was like, I'm gonna go back and watch them. And I put in the first episode, and after about 10 minutes, I was like, this really. I love this as a kid, but it's not hitting for me as an adult. So I turned it off. But it's one of those
It's the internalized shame.
things where I didn't go on this rant about
Just
Thundercats
what I was
because I
thinking.
realized that it wasn't really for me anymore. I still love it, and it's really important. I'm sure a lot of people would still love it too. But yeah, you find things that you grew up with that just aren't what you remember them being.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Is he talking about the Thundercats
Million,
Go or whatever, where it's the stupid Cal Arts animation style?
I think he's referring to like he rewatched the old stuff he grew up on, and he can't get into it now.
Because I think he's talking about the new stuff, which is hilarious to me because he's saying exactly what we're saying. It's not the same, and he doesn't like it. Why doesn't he like it? Because it's not the same. And yeah, you can be like, whatever. But he's making the whole point. And he's making the whole point we're making, where it's like, if you're changing it to the point where it's not the same, don't expect people who were fans of that thing to like it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you like the fact that anti-fan or like fandom and anti-fans are just basically the concept of fandom? Isn't fans stupid? It's great, isn't it? Like, totally insult everybody because they don't agree with you, because that's all you've got. You don't have any like ground to stand on. You don't have anything to like.
That's how you know they lost the arguments, right?
Well, they don't understand that because they're emotional people. They don't have logical outcomes to anything they say. But this guy's like, yeah, I'm gonna have a avatar of a black person with white face because that's totally okay in that regard, I guess. But he's like, oh, anti-fandom definitely sounds like the concept of fandom. And it's like, but how? Like, there's stupid people on both sides. Like, not everybody's like gonna have good takes on things, but the difference is why you're there, not that you have a different take. Like, if these guys were showing up saying, I like this content and I don't want it to change, I'd be like, yeah, you're just like anybody else. But even if you prefer something else, like if you want this character and I don't care about that character, at least the fact is that you're going to be there. And I can be like, hey, you have a person I don't care about, but at least you're holding to the source material. That's all I care about. because you enjoy that source material. It's not for me. That's completely fine. Even they admit by their own actions and what they push that if they were to create something else, like if they were to create an original character, it probably wouldn't do good. That's why they have to co-op something that's already established. It's because they admit themselves they can't write. They can't create good stories. They can't even do good art. I mean, if anybody's seen the new She-Hulk comic that came out, oh my gosh. I've seen Picasso art make more make actual sense better in that regard.
Well,
like
they think that's good art.
Which it's not. It's the same thing with Cartoon Network. Went away from like cartoony kind of graphics to the more modern, like everything's a shape.
I think they say they think that's good art, but they all know that it's not.
Mm-hmm. As they say, well, they're projecting, of course, so they're coping with.
Well, let me
yeah.
be specific. Artists doing it think it's good art. That's their art style. I have no problem with their art style being their art style, right? The people selling it, however, are trying to sell it based on thinking it's good art and blame us for being fascist for not buying it.
Pretty much.
Is, I mean, it's the exact same thing. I think the difference is, I started using anti-fandom intentionally because I would say chud a lot or whatever, and it's like, I still use that sometimes, but anti-fandom, I think, is the most kind of, like, I guess you could say, clinical word you could use for it. Like, it's not meant to be an insult. It's not meant to be, chud is, a fandom obviously is, but, like, it's just a description of it in the way that, like, a fan is someone who engages with the thing, not always positively, but like they'll critically engage with it in a reasonable way, a fair way. And then a non-fan is just somebody that doesn't fucking pay attention to the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's got to be a third thing, which is an anti-fan.
I don't think paying attention is what makes you a fan or not a fan.
No, but not paying attention probably does make you not a fan, right?
Because you can't be like, I like this thing. Like what?
Exactly.
I don't know. Like you have to be invested to be a fan. Like you like the story, you like the plot, you like the plot armor in some senses. Like you like how the entire universe is laid out. You like all the little details about the universe. Like those are things you pay attention to. So not paying attention would mean you're not doing those things, which is what makes you a fan. Like why would you like something that you literally know nothing about?
Mm-hmm. So then,
I don't think they're actually going to
that's
mention.
what you said, right?
Say what?
That's what you said, right?
What?
Not paying attention makes you not a fan.
I'm sorry, I'm not a fan. I wasn't paying attention to what you said.
Nice.
Sorry. But yes, that's kind of that thing. Yeah, I was hoping they were going to do the Geeks and Gamers mention, but I think that was from somebody else's clip I saw. But essentially,
No, he kind of did passively.
Well, he did, but he didn't mention Geeks and Gamers specifically.
Yeah.
Like they actually do call out Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers for saying he's not going to like something and then changing his tune to saying he likes something. And I doubt it's going to be in the last minute here, but
Right, because God forbid you change your opinion, right?
Well, it's just like what would happen if you said I'm going to love this and then you're like I actually didn't. Is that bad all of a sudden? But if you change it to like, well, I don't think it's going to be good. Like a lot of people didn't like the Dungeons and Dragons movie, like trailers and stuff, because it looked like they were crapping on guys. They were making all the women super great, but it also didn't help. It's the same thing with like House of the Dragon. They had the creators saying really stupid things, and then it was hurting what people were wanting to come see it. But in all reality, the actual story didn't have any of that stuff in it the way they were saying it was. It's just they wouldn't keep their mouths shut, and they were like, oh, look at us virtuous signaling because reasons, rather than just saying, I hope you like our film. I hope you like our show. I hope you like our content. And they would be fine.
I would disagree with you on that, but okay, we don't need to sidetrack.
What specifically would you disagree on?
The birthing scene, or changing the actual storyline to make it.
A lot of people didn't have issues with that in the way that you would expect. Like if they weren't commenting on that stuff, it wouldn't have been necessarily as big of a deal. It might have been like that's a weaker writing plot, or this is not as good as something else. But it wouldn't have been like, oh oh boy, and that like there are certain
Well,
issues.
Okay, I'll shorten it up this way. George R. Martin, when he wrote the material, set up that women had a pretty crappy position to begin with, right? So in other words, he depicted in there as, yeah, this is a problem that women are considered second-class citizens and so forth. He wrote it, right? Instead of using what he wrote, which is a good way of doing it, they used more modern intersectional versions of that. I don't want to go down because it was still not as bad as some of the other crap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My biggest problem with the TV show is the parts I was interested in, which was the early wars, and where they just glossed over for the first 5 episodes with that massive time skipping. You know what I mean? I understand why they did it, but like I said, I don't want to do a derail at the end here.
My point was that like when Dungeons and Dragons directors come out and be like, yeah, we did this because of this, we did this, and it's just like, but people actually ended up watching the film and were like, oh, it's not actually that bad. Like they were hyping it up in a negative sense, essentially. The creators were on their own, and then it got to the point where we're just like, you know, I don't want to go see it, and then it bombs, and people are like, well, why did it bomb? It was a good film. I was like, well, maybe it was a good film, but people didn't go because you literally told them off by warning them of what the content's going to be, and that's this constant theme.
Well, it also bombed because of its position in the release between John Wick 4 and Super Mario.
Yeah, that too.
That's also I think
That was a stupid decision on their part, but
yeah,
And they're paying attention to it, but just all they're doing is shitting on it, and in some cases lying about it, and advocating like for it to fail and stuff like that. So I think anti-fan is just the most.
we want it to fail so that we can get the infection out and we can heal and go back to having good stuff. That's what we want.
exactly.
That's it.
Yeah.
Efficient word to use.
Yeah,
But
it's a very good word. I got tired of saying anti-woke and anti-SJW. It's just
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, anti-fan sums it up like perfectly.
It sums it up really well.
Well, except anti-fan describes something entirely different than what they're saying it does.
Well, no, what anti-fan does for them is when they say someone's anti-woke, they're identifying themselves as woke, and you know what I mean. If you think
Yeah,
about
but they
the
don't follow their
term,
own definitions.
No, I'm saying the logic is they're trying to get rid of them, of people thinking of them as SJWs and woke. They're trying to shift the verbal discourse so the terms woke and SJW don't come up anymore.
Oh, yeah, I see. Trying to manipulate the language so they don't seem like the bad guys anymore.
Well, the Nazis didn't think they were the bad guys.
Yeah, but
Isn't it? The people that have the
Indeed,
same
yeah.
values as Nazis don't think that they're the bad guys.
The Nazis are only driven to it because of all the time travelers who are going back to try to kill them.
yeah.
It's because Indiana Jones punched so many Nazis. That's what really threw them over the edge. Anyway, that's basically their view on fandom, and I was just like, this is ridiculous. And with the whole Jeremy from Geeks Gamers, like, you won't even let somebody like something that they originally weren't intending to like, and you're like, well, that's because of grifting. I'm like, he almost never does that. It's very rare for someone to change their opinion after they've kind of set themselves up to be a specific way. Like, I am this way about this film. Boom, I'm going to be bad. Like, I love John Wick. So if I'm going in saying, I really am looking forward to this film and I want it to succeed, and then I go see it, and then I'm actually disappointed, and I come out and say, that was actually terrible. I can't believe they did that to the series. You're not going to hear me say that if it's a good film. But if it's a bad film, then of course I'm going to be like, yeah, go see it, because I want more bad John Wick films. But every time they make a good John Wick film, which is so far every single time, people keep coming. And it keeps doing better and better than the previous ones, and it's going to get bigger. Now we have a TV show coming out. John Wick 5's already in the books to basically be done, and then both Keanu and the show or the director has basically been on record saying, "Hey, as long as you guys keep showing up and want more of this, we'll keep making this." And people are like, "Sure, take my money." It's been that way the whole time, but they don't want money. That's why all these other films are flopping. They don't want money. And if you just
Mhm.
if
It's
Disney
about the
was
message.
yeah, if Disney was playing the game based off of investors and based off of shareholders and the people that want to make profit, considering Disney has what $9 billion they owe to Comcast to buy Hulu, like if you want that kind of stuff, you need to make what makes money. But what makes money is non-agenda based stuff. Even if you let in a little bit here and there and like make it not as big of a deal and just put it in there, just not be at the forefront of the entire thing, then people are probably less likely to care. But because so much has been pushed down our throats, we're like, I don't want to even like put myself or my family in front of the screen because then it's just to be they're preached at the entire time. And no, we don't go to movies to get preached at unless it's a movie about a preacher scandal or something. I don't know.
Well, regardless of what you think about like Doomcock's version of the Disney Civil War and all that, if you read the financial papers, the groups of who control Disney, the rich investors and whatever, there's a legitimate war going on in that board with the ones who want to make actual money. Like when all these movies have been flopping, and like they're saying, well, the movies are flopping, fire everyone involved, and the other people are saying, because they want to defend their woke position, is, oh no, they're not flopping, we're just not marketing them correctly, and they're getting.
That's the problem. The marketing is the woke part.
Yeah.
We're not doing it correctly. Yeah, that's the point.
Just like the CEO just got fired for the beer.
Oh yeah.
Marketing.
He kept doubling down and tripling down on what was losing money, and finally the board fired him.
Which is what they should have done a long time ago. Because they lost what, 2 warehouses, 700 employees. Like,
Oh yeah.
they're hurting so freaking bad. But Anheuser-Busch, which pretty much owns like all the beers in America, essentially, it's a dip in the overall. But if there was something that popped up and said, "Oh, it's actually Anheuser-Busch that's pushing this," that could be huge.
Well,
like
that's what they're afraid of, you know.
they should be afraid of it because they're the idiots who did this to make it. I mean, Bud Light was always a stupid drink to begin with, but I mean, they nailed that coffin. There's no return from that part. I don't think Bud Light's going to be able to recover. They're going to have to either rebrand it entirely, which if they do, people will still remember, or they're going to have to just drop it completely and then shift all their assets over to other beers.
Market it overseas.
People, they're like,
But
I don't.
wise won't catch on. Belgium will.
Place for Bud Light.
You won't be marketing it in Europe at all because I mean,
Well, they're about as gay
the
as
quality of
better
beer
beers
in
anyway.
America and Europe is drastic.
Well,
But you market it in like Asia somewhere or Africa.
Well, no, Anheuser-Busch's products in Europe aren't made like American beers. Like in America, you have to pasteurize everything. That's one of the big differences. And you know what I mean? If you're a corporation, sell you like a local brewery doesn't, but the big ones do. And like so, when they sell beer in Europe, and they use different formulas and everything. So
different methods, different strokes for different folks.
Yep.
Well, that was all I had planned, and that was actually a lot shorter than I was expecting it to be.
the first 4 minutes of that video took us almost 2 hours.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
wow.
Yeah. Less than an hour and a half. So that's impressive. We're going. Progress, not perfection.
I just find it very funny that the fella's correct in that there's fans and anti-fans, but he's got the positions reversed. You know, the fans are the people who love, cherish, and want to protect the.
I mean,
the source.
The
material,
definitions
the
they
IP.
gave in the beginning were, in my opinion, perfectly spot on, but then in applying them to the specific groups, they messed up massively. I don't know how.
Well, it's like one of these guys from like Antifa going out and saying, you know, fascists are the ones who want to take all the control and, you know, tell everybody else what to do with their lives. And, you know, like yeah, you're getting there. You're getting there. And it's like, yeah, and that's everybody but us. And you're like, and you lost it.
I mean, they can't be anti-fascist, right? Because it's in the name. Oh no, wait, that's whoops. I think I messed up that one.
Yeah, it's like, I'm against authoritarian government. You're a fascist. I'm like, that's not how that works. But yeah, Not to get political on the stream, guys.
Oh, not at all.
But yeah,
We almost did it.
I want to thank you guys for hanging out because I know I wanted to try this last week when it was still fresh in my mind. I still made it, but thanks for the last week of putting it together. I know you guys are really, really busy with all your intellectual prowess, and and I'm over here like, hey. So, but yeah, I feel blessed that you guys come on as much as you guys do, and I know if I'm not probably the most enjoyable person to hang out with my long rambling, since I could probably out ramble anyone on the planet, but I feel blessed.
Don't challenge any of
Lord,
us
were
on
you
that. I
born a
think.
rambling man?
You severely understand or really underdog my ability to self-deprecate and also to ramble. Those are two of the things I am like number one on the planet. I'd say I'd be the best on the planet if I wasn't the worst, because self-deprecation requires me to be the worst. But that's besides.
I like to think that I'm good at listening to people. So if you ramble on for too long, that's not
I
really
know.
a problem
That's
for
because
me.
I had a 6-hour conversation that wasn't recorded. So, you missed your calling. You should have been a psychologist or a therapist. But yeah, thanks guys for hanging out. I greatly appreciate it. Hopefully we'll have more. I'm sure we'll have plenty of content to cover at some point. Gadfly, have you ever gotten your YouTube channel up and running yet?
No, still a little too busy with.
You're killing me. Who's gonna be my number one promoter if not you? Come on.
Well, once I actually finish the MA and all that sort of stuff,
Well, we're
then,
cheering on.
time opens up.
Time heals all wounds and causes a whole lot of problems in the wait list.
Yeah.
But yeah, why don't we go around the panel and let everybody, totally shill themselves, because if you won't do it, I will, and I don't know what I'm supposed to shill. So go for it.
I'm occasionally on this stream. I'm occasionally on the White Cloaks. I've been on technically Mexican and Nerdporial Continuum. So, I mean, if you're looking for me specifically, those are the places where I will show up most likely. But you should check all those places out anyways, regardless.
But I claim him. So cool. And maybe eventually we'll get an actual YouTube channel for you, so we can pump you those rookie numbers up.
Yeah, 0 is the rookiest number, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I'm sitting at like 108, so I don't know. That's pretty rookie. I gotta get to 500 so I can make $1 million eventually. What about you, Matt? What do you got going on?
With any luck, I'll finish up my review of season 2 of From. I got 3 more episodes to finish. And I'll also start my review of Warrior season 3, which just came out. Everyone should be watching those shows, From and Warrior. They're probably 2 of the best shows on TV right now. I'm also going to put together. I got some articles I've been accumulating for Rings of Prime that I want to talk about some stuff they've been claiming. Just what the articles have been talking about, gearing up for the eventual, nonsense that's coming out later this year, I guess. What else is going on? That's the main stuff going on for me right now.
You're not gonna do any game streaming or anything?
I don't do that. I can't do video too much. I have severe arthritis in my hands and wrists, so games are done for me.
I was gonna say I almost want you to go through the Gollum game just to see the torturous things. I would do it, but Gary's much better at it than I am.
There was a point with game streaming where, like, if this was 15 years ago when I gamed a lot, I would probably have built an audience as would be the most loudmouth, vulgar gamers. Like, I would one of those guys who scream at the video game screen, like, how could you do that to me, you motherfucker? I would do things like, I was a very vindictive PvPer. I would live and let live with PvP, player versus player, for those who don't know. But if you mess with me, I was vindictive. Like in World of Warcraft, before they nerfed this, I won sheep the guy for 6 straight hours.
Damn.
I turned into a sheep for 6 hours.
Nice.
That's a 20-second spell. I just kept it over and over again because he wouldn't leave me alone.
You're just vindictive like a good Catholic boy.
It's the Sicilian way.
All right. What about you, Sage? What you got going on?
Well, not really that much. Sometimes I can be found here, and yeah,
I can make it happen
maybe-
more often if you want. At this rate, I'm
maybe
gonna
yeah,
have
I
a
can.
live stream challenge.
He's working on that pesky knowledge stuff that the SJWs don't like.
Yeah, exactly.
Science.
Luckily, the hard sciences, let's call them, are a bit more safe, but
All the better
do not
because
have great defenses.
Not anymore. Now that math is racist.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
math was the Arabians, so I guess they're racist against Arabians now. Okay.
yeah, it's a bit of a paradox there, but I'm sure we can work it out. Yeah, maybe at some point I'll
When's your
be elsewhere,
coming?
but who knows?
When's your YouTube channel coming out?
I don't know.
Better get on.
Maybe at some point.
I want to get me some physics knowledge, and obviously can't do that if you ain't posting videos.
Yeah, there are much better YouTubers for that.
You need to make a channel to tell me where to go, so I know where to go, so I can come watch your content about you telling me where to go.
I see. Yeah, no, that could be a business model, I guess.
Or you could just watch other physics people and say that's not right, and then tell us how it actually is.
Yeah,
It's a foolproof plan. It
indeed.
works for every
Yeah.
YouTuber.
Oh, who's that guy who he's a engineer or whatever? He plays word games with physics for all his big videos. Starts with a V, I think. He did the video about the turning on a light bulb with a wire that was 1 light year in length or something like that. If you're into this area, anyway, it's way side.
Yeah, no, I think I know who you're talking
Yeah.
about, but I can't remember the name.
He was playing word games with physics to make, because how, like, if the thing was 1 light year in length, how come the light bulb will light up like a second after you turn it on?
Yeah, that's because the electricity doesn't go through the energy doesn't go
Yeah,
through
it
the wire.
propagates through the electric
exactly.
field. But he was playing word games, and he got like a million views for it, and a whole bunch of physics engineers were like, "You're making people stupid with videos like this," you know.
So Sage, I need you to make a YouTube channel to find that video, to make the video, to tell me where to find the video.
Let's see. Let's see. That does make sense, maybe.
Logic.
Exactly.
How about you, Artyrian? What's going on with you?
Much like Sage and Gasfly, I can be found here from time to time, and other than that, not much. I'm just chewing on some ideas for the future. Once I've got proper setup.
And your YouTube channel's coming when?
I've actually been
Crickets.
thinking about that. I
Well, I mean,
maybe
Gadfly,
August or September.
Gadfly, Sage, and you all have like a good area you guys are in. Gadfly's big in the history, Sage is good in like the science physics, and you're good in like the theology. So you can really work those corners. And I'm sitting here probably less interesting than Matt and his pop culture stuff in that regard. So I mean, we all have our little things. Unfortunately I should have gone on to become a philosophy channel, and I really missed that train. But so there's things you guys got, and you definitely got the knowledge for each of those areas to really just nail it home and let everybody know what they're missing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could take these guys that are all about like your internalized shame, and then just be like, look, guys, here's the real reality.
The history of anti-fans.
Basically, like that's what actually. Gadfly, you, Sage, and Alterian can make a documentary together about the history of anti-fans.
You can make a shared channel, the Medievalists.
You have Gadfly going, here's the chronological and historical evidence, and then you have Sage over here going, here's how the physics works for anti-fans. And you have Alterian says, here's what the anti-fans believe.
I mean, to be fair, anti-fans, basically, it works just like antimatter, right? If a fan and the anti-fan come together, you get a volatile reaction, I suppose.
I thought it was called the Super Saiyan merging fusion thing.
No, they don't fuse. It's more like an explosion that happens.
Well, we should probably go and end it there before Pips is going to yell at us for hitting the last 5 minutes of their stream over at White Cloaks. So if anybody is watching, is enjoying Lord of the Rings content, go head over to the White Cloaks stream that they're doing right now. I think they're doing book chapter coverage or whatever. I'm probably
Yeah, I
gonna
gotta hop over there in a few minutes.
They're doing the first half of the second half of the third book
That's
They're doing the first half of the second half of the third half.
of the third book.
Well, that's the third half. It's just a 3/2 part. But yeah, thanks everybody for hanging out. I'm gonna try to not forget, because I always do, to forget to promote the Questioners Discord channel, since I'm intelligent like that. It's probably gonna put it into the description below if I can recall to do so, which I will try to remember. If I don't, leave a comment and remind me, and I will post it. Because I will see the comments. I will forget everything else though. And let me know, and any of the panel here, that you like their content by subscribing, commenting, leaving your thoughts. And obviously, I would say let me know if you want to see them on more often. But let's be real, I'm going to have them on anyway. So it's all good anyway. So
You're
hopefully,
doomed, viewers.
it's the best kind of viewer to be. So I want to thank Dungeon Master Blaster for hanging out for a good chunk of this. I'm surprised you stuck around. Most people don't stick around, but anybody else who stuck around but didn't just chat in the chat, thanks for being
We also
around.
did like 50 or 60% of the comments.
Yep, and I'm probably the other like 10%. So
Pips has a good number in there.
Pips had like 4 or 5 things. It's Pips. Anyway, thanks everybody for hanging out, and remember, walk in the light, my friends.
Thank you.